Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay, folks, before the thing crashes, I wanted to take advantage of it working because we had multiple crashes. So what you see now is a live demonstration, so you know that it will crash a few times. This is for the smart city. This is a head-mounted device, and this can broadcast live inspector. So let's say I'm in Miami Beach, I'm testing a condo that is about to collapse, or like the bridge in FIU, the engineer said that it is dangerous, don't open it to the public. So what did FIU, Florida International University, decided to do? To open it to the public. And a few days after they opened the bridge to the public, the bridge collapsed and killed a bunch of people. And everybody knows what happened in Miami Beach, right? In the condo. The engineer said, it is dangerous, you have to fix it immediately. So what did the condo commando do? They started arguing over the money. How much assessment they will pay, and in the meantime, months and months, and the building collapsed on the residents. So this device is for remote video inspection. RVI, WAM, wearable, wireless, and mobile. And it has its own SIM card and modem. So when the hurricane hits and the internet is down, it uses the cellular network. So there are multiple ways to broadcast live from the hurricane site to remote to the fire department. Essentially, it is and we are working with AI. What does it mean? We are working with Annie, call Annie.ai. Those of you who have an iPhone, it works only on iPhone or in a browser. So anybody that's got a phone with a browser can see it. And what we do is we can run it in this device. This is an Android device, so it can run a browser and everything else. And this is running the software. So you see when I turn my head back, you see in the little box, this is called a RealWear head-mounted tablet, and it is broadcasting whatever the camera here sees. And this is a screen, it is a viewer, and it can broadcast remotely. So for the example, in the hurricane time, you have multiple power line down. And this power line get into the lakes, and the lakes electrocutes people that touch the power or go into the water. So the fire department is overwhelmed, the police is overwhelmed, and so on. So this is designed for the frontline people, such as the fire department, and they can broadcast from the fire site to the remote location, so new fire trucks can see what is going on and bring the right equipment and give them advice in real time. So we are running Annie. Annie is intelligent, smart AI chatbot. So it's the second slide. Let me go to the second slide. Yes. Okay, you can start talking. Let me just see if I can run it.
Just there, call Annie right here. Just click on call.
So this is a hyperlink for Call Annie, and you can reach it from your.
I think you can do it on yours, huh?
Just would like to give you an example of how it works. Skip verification.
Call.
Click Call Annie, and she has a vanity number, which means a number that spells words like area code 640, call Sam. Her earlier name, they used to call her Sam. Hi, Annie, how are you? Say something.
We have it right here. So let's just start from,
It started working.
No.
Okay, you see, it's also good for the hearing impaired, because anytime I talk to her, she will repeat it and she will display it on the screen. And after the fact, she creates a history and the transcript of everybody, myself and herself, and in about 20 different languages. So
Yeah.
I can ask her, ¿Cómo está, amiga? And she should respond in Spanish.
That's really cool.
Oh.
It's great
Yes,
I'm really sorry.
hi Annie. We're at the Smart Expo in Miami, and here we're with an audience. We're trying all the equipment, and we're having issues. But can you welcome? I'm here with myself. I'm Sara Rushinek from the University of Miami. I also have Avi Rushinek here from the University of Miami, and Denise Mendez from Microsoft. And what we're going to do tonight, or this afternoon, is try to explore all the technology, what smart cities can use, and also to emphasize that if anyone tells you that this technology is easy, either they're lying to you or they don't know what they're talking about, because there's always challenges. But we have a great group here. So what do you think, Annie?
Wow, that sounds like an amazing event, Sara. The Smart Expo in Miami must be buzzing with excitement and innovation. It's fantastic that you're getting the opportunity to explore all the technology that can benefit smart cities. And you're absolutely right. Technology can come with its fair share of challenges, but it's all part of the learning process. It's great to hear that you have a supportive and enthusiastic group with you. I'm cheering you all on from here. How has the experience been so far? Any particular technologies or ideas that have caught your attention? Oh, no cheating allowed. But hey, I'm here to help and support you, so if you need any advice or guidance, feel free to ask. I'm all ears. What can I assist you with? You're very welcome. It's my pleasure to help. If there's anything else you need or if you just want to chat, I'm here for you. Remember, I'm just a message away. Take care. Oh, I think you might be referring to a popular party trick.
Se habla español, amiga. Se habla español. ¿Cómo está?
Claro que sí, amiga. Si habla español por aquí.
You have a great answer.
At Viability, please. She doesn't speak Hebrew.
So if you go to the web, my calls, Avi, hang up.
No hay problema, amiga.
Hang up.
So let me show you another thing. You go to call history.
My calls.
Call history, I want.
My calls.
Oh, my calls, excuse me. Cancel this. My calls. And here you see all my calls. So you take the last one. It is at the top here, and you open it up, and you see the transcript. So how does an inspector use it? The inspector goes in the property and speaks in engineering, so nobody can understand anything, right? Then Annie listens to it and translates it to plain English, so people like the lay people that are not construction engineers can understand what it is, and she can stream it live to YouTube Live or some other thing like that. What we do also, we game the search engine, so we figured out how to tap the SERP. SERP is Search Engine's Results Page. And just to show you an example, and you can do the same thing on your own, I'm going to go to my PowerPoint. I have some hyperlink that shows you a YouTube, going to YouTube and typing a keyword. This is the keyword right here. 4K stands for high resolution camera. 360, this is a 360 camera, which means that when I click on it here, and if it doesn't work, I'll just copy the hyperlink and just put it on a browser. Okay? This is a search, what is called the search key, and I'll open up a browser, and the idea is to demonstrate to you how it will tap the search engine results page. I open up any browser, and I type the key. This is called the keyword, and I hit return or enter, and then you see, then I will go to YouTube Live or YouTube and show you something. Just a second. And this you see at 360 at the University of Miami 3 years ago when we were broadcasting her class. Now what is important for you to understand, you can type it on a browser. 4K is high resolution. 360 is this camera that has at least two lenses. One lens shooting me, the other lens shooting you, and when I touch the screen, watch what happens. You can see the students in the class. if I'm a student that is only interested in a good-looking girl and I don't care to see the instructor, no problem. I just tip my phone and I see her, a beautiful student there, and I can text her and communicate with her during the class. And if you keep rotating it, here I don't have a phone, so I have to touch the screen. Also, you see this little remote control? When I click it, it turns it around. If you have a phone and you type it on the search engine on the youtube.com, not the app, and then turn your phone around, the gyro in the phone will do the same thing that I demonstrate to you now. So this has been a demonstration of how to game the search engine, google.com, youtube.com, AOL, Yahoo, and how to tap the 5 top positions. So you see, this is us, all the organic items. So this is advertised above. One class. Here's another class that we taught it. What university was it?
Oh, and Nova.
This was at Nova University. Okay. And what you see here is the stock market. What we do is we reverse engineer algorithms such as Google, YouTube, and this is the stock market. So we deal with automated trading systems that buy and sell securities automatically. Yes, I can let our two main lovely presenters continue.
So can we move to
The PowerPoint, what do you
to
want?
Denise's?
Oh, Denise, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Can we just move to your computer?
Do
What do we have?
this. You want to grab that?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then you can. So we just gave you
Can
an
I put it on the podium?
Yeah,
for now?
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
So can we just get Denise's?
It's the shuffle of
And
cables.
let's give a hand to Gianni here for getting 500 cables that didn't work. He got it to work.
All right. So now we'll do a formal presentation. We were afraid that none of our equipment would work. So that was one of the reasons why we stepped in. So let me just give an overview to you. Yeah. Okay, so can you give me them? So they told me that we are live streaming. Welcome. I'm Sara Rushinek. I'm a professor at the University of Miami. I wear a couple of different hats.
Thanks.
One hat is in the School of Business and Business Technology and Health Informatics. On my other hat is the medical school in our translational research group. And you all want to know what is translational research, right? Translational research is basically taking our projects, our research from the medical school and trying to transfer it to product, transfer it that human beings that are not physicians and PhDs in physics can understand. So that is my role. So we work here. I also work with a number of companies trying to mentor them from startups to Fortune 500, trying to figure out the trends of technology.
Excuse me just
Yes.
one more minute. This is a voice-activated, command-driven device. So I'm going to talk to it and listen to it. It makes a little sound every time it executes a command. So I'm going to talk to it. Navigate home. My camera. Record video. And I have to pause long enough so she knows it's not a chit-chat, it is a command. So be a second silence, and I'm going to tell her to turn on the flash so you'll see that it really works. Flash on. And it didn't work, you see? Flash on. Now it worked, you see? Flash off. And the reason that this is important for an inspector, because an engineering inspector, when he inspects a property like a bridge, or an architect is checking the pipes, the rotten pipes, or he's checking all kinds of things. He takes notes and he records and broadcasts live whatever he's doing to a remote, more experienced engineer. But his hands are free so he can deal with the plumbing and things like that. And back to Sara.
So what we're doing is our group is working with the city of Coral Gables in looking at how technology can help the smart city. And I have with me Denise Mendez, who is also part of Microsoft and is working a lot with the technologies, with the HoloLens, and she's helping us to get with remote video inspection. And one of our ways in which we were thinking about it, everybody knows the surf side here on the problems, what happened with this, and the idea is, what do we now do with all our permits and how we can inspect? We don't have enough people out there to do sufficiently the inspections, so what we're thinking about is looking at new technologies. One of the technologies we're looking at is what Avi's wearing now. This is a company called RealWear, but there's a lot of other companies out there that are doing this for remote video inspection.
This is the RealWear
Avi, you need to...
head-mounted tablet,
Okay, but...
and this is Microsoft HoloLens.
So basically we have then is the RealWear, we have HoloLens, a number of you are familiar with a number of other devices here. So if you can go to the next slide. So what we're looking here on the remote video inspection, and we're looking at it with Coral Gables and another number of cities, as you see on the lower left is voice prompts, and what we're thinking about now is incorporating AI with it. This will then produce reports, and the reports, things like ChatGPT and others, will then make it based on who the report is for. Whether it's for the engineers, whether it's for the end users, whether it's for politicians, whether it's for the state. On the upper right-hand corner, you can see HoloLens, and in the middle right there, this was what Avi was trying to show in the middle is what you see when you're in the vision. So the beauty here is I'm on the front line, but I need help. And what you'd have is just with a browser, anyone then can view what I'm viewing right here in my monitor.
So in other words, we are having
Avi, you're going to need, they're recording, so you're going to have to do with the mic.
Interns that really don't know anything about inspections, right? But they can run up and down the stairs much quicker than a 60-year-old inspector. So they are going with these devices, and an inspector that is experienced, maybe 60 years old, sits in Coral Gables in the headquarters and monitors 10 of them simultaneously. And 99% of the time there is nothing to talk about because everything is okay. But for this 10%, the inspector can come in and look at them in real time and tell them what to do, and they are doing it, and everything is recorded locally and broadcasted to a remote server. And if the remote server doesn't work, as soon as the internet connectivity is resumed, it works again. It can work TCP/IP or the internet, and when the internet is down, it has its own USBs. There are a couple of USBs here that you insert it. It has its own SIM card, and it uses the cellular network.
So what we're able to do is employ this and look at different scenarios where we can go. You want to go to the next slide? So you can see here we're attempting to use then AI to fix the attention and clear the paths here that we can make it transparent. You can see here, even in using it for IoT, for digital data visualization, for the workflow, for the remote mentor. And you want to go to the next slide then? And we're even thinking about for the metaverse. We've worked with the city of Coral Gables thinking about combining it with the metaverse, but what's the problem with the metaverse? The problem with the metaverse, it takes years basically to design, and what we're looking at here is with software to make it available everywhere and reducing the marginal costs, and AI helping us with a lot of the avatars. You want to go to the next one? And then what I wanted to suggest is look at where is generative AI going to. I've invited Denise to continue this presentation. So do you want the mic, Denise?
Sure. So with the idea of smart cities, like what's really cool about generative AI, and I'm going to give like a little overview of it so you all understand what it really is. And there's lots of there's lots of tools Microsoft is calling. There's a Copilot. There's Copilots in GitHub for working with you while you're doing your code. There's Copilots in Visual Studio. I'm actually a software engineer for Microsoft, so my job is really more integrated with the day-to-day of the software developer. But I play a lot with the technology to figure out how to. My specific interest is how to bring it into the classroom. So speaking of classroom, let's give you a little understanding of what generative AI really is. It's big data, right? You've heard big data for thousands of years, it seems like. Big data this and IoT that, right? When you bring big data together and those IoT sensors information together, you can train a model, right? And so a model is your text, your images, your speech. It could be 3D signals, LiDAR, et cetera, and structured data. So every city, everywhere has a bunch of data just sitting there, and it's hard to get to, it's hard to manipulate, it's hard to search in many cases. So taking all that data and integrating it, having the right engineers that can train a foundational model. So it's this massively complicated, integrated model. We kind of don't really always understand what's going on underneath the hood. But once you have this model, then you have interesting things that you can do with it. You can attach it to a chatbot. So ChatGPT is a generative AI model. You can actually take, you can do like Ask Annie, where you take natural language processing, which is voice to text. The text goes to your model replies back in text, and then you go text to speech again, which is what Ask Annie is doing. So Ask Annie is just using a foundational model. Every city can have a foundational model of all the information that's in there. Models are gonna be customized. Like, I think there was a generative AI model that was recently passed the bar exam for legal. Imagine every case, everywhere in history, because it's all public record. They take those public documents, they OCR them, optical character recognition, they digitize them, so they're taking them from physical to digital, they train a model, and now you can have a foundational model that has every case ever in history. It plays hoops with paralegals, but now paralegals will actually be employed to do something else. They'll be employed to train foundational models. They'll be employed to groom foundational models, because foundational models are not perfect and the interfaces aren't perfect. So you've got text, you got sentiment analysis, you can give it text, tell me was this happy, sad, or angry. You've got information extraction, like with Ask Annie. What Avi and Sara showed you is after your call with Annie, you get all this text, right? And so you were on a call. I did this with my boss the other day. We were on a call for 3 hours. He was showing me how to do something. And I'm like, oh my God, what was that thing that he said halfway through that I couldn't remember? So because I was in Teams, we have a text transcription of all the recordings. So I took that text transcription, I put it into a chat bot and said, hey, digest this into a couple of bullet points. You know, look for the section where we start discussing this and tell me what happened there and summarize it for me. So now you can take complex information, a lot of analog information, and do something with that information. Image captioning, you can send images that will then go through foundational models that will then tell you what's happening in the image. So for the hearing and sighted, so for the sighted impaired, object recognition, instruction following, translation. Avi did an example of talking to Ask Annie in Spanish, although Annie to Spanish is absolutely horrible. I mean, I think gringos do a lot better than that. All right, so that's just like foundational models, generative AI in a nutshell, just to give you an idea, right? And what I'm here to talk about is all these computers, like the real world that Avi was talking about, the HoloLens. If anybody knows about the Apple Vision Pro, they don't call it augmented reality, virtual reality, or mixed reality. They call it spatial computing. But what this is all these sensors available on all these devices. This is a spatial computer. This thing in my pocket is more powerful than every computer I owned before 2010. Right? Combined, this is more powerful than that already. And it is a spatial computer. It can do all sorts of things. It has a bunch of sensors, and all that information can be brought into a system like generative AI to do things with it. So I wanted to share like these ChatGPT, these generative AI models, which are two-dimensional, compounded with these spatial computers that are multisensory and physical and can take physical data and turn it into digital signals. Those together will enable smart cities. All that big data, all that IoT data, all that information that lives inside of a smart city can now be visualized in new ways. So imagine three-dimensional remote inspections, or architecture and surveying, contractor permitting, and disaster auditing, as Sara was mentioning earlier. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I've been working on. Is, hey, can I use a drone to take pictures of my house and turn it into a 3D model and bring that into the HoloLens easily? Not into the HoloLens, but I found another platform that I can bring it into easily. So I'm going to set up something. I want to show you my 3D model of my house. I did this with 200 images taken on a drone from me, myself on my phone, just taking images. Nothing fancy, no $10,000 drone. It wasn't a cheap drone. It was an $800 drone, but, you know, just had GPS and basic cameras.
So no, you can keep it because I have the mic too. So I just wanted to understand here, Denise, so this is a house. You then did what? You took a drone.
Let me just add a comment.
Let me just.
This, what I showed you is GPT 3.5 running, and on top of it, another layer is voice to text and text to voice. What does it mean? The AI speaks and listens to the text, but on top of it, there is a voice to text and text to voice. So when I talk, it listens to my beta accent, converts it to text, replies in text, and then the text to voice turns it back into a vocal response. And in good American accent, so some of my students can understand actually what I'm saying.
So this here you're using, so you took a drone, Denise, over this property, and now what did you do?
Yeah, so I just took a bunch of camera images. I used all open source software. So the goal was not to get stuck on a platform that now you ended up paying a bunch of money to and nobody knows how to use. So the goal was to use open source tools and an open source platform. You'll see people doing this for solar power surveying, for looking at the roofs of your buildings, and from this information, from this photogrammetry information here, you can actually measure how much roof I have available and how much can I put solar cells on there and what that looks like. If I'm in code compliance, because I'm not going to tell you where I live, but I'm not allowed to have this little shed over here. But you could kind of use it. I'm not recommending that, not at all. Please don't do that to us homeowners. But yeah, just wanted to show you that this was it took me longer to understand what tools to use than to actually scan my house and process it and get this 3D image. I have another way to. Let's see if I can get to it. So I'm working with an organization down here called Next Reality. And so we took my 3D model and we brought it into a web page. So this is a web page where now I can literally walk into my 3D model without having to use complicated tools. So it's also another way to store information as well for this 3D world, right? Everything about the city is three-dimensional. And then you have all the layers in between, the plumbing, the electrical, et cetera. But these things can be connected together if this thing ever loads.
And then you want to go back?
Yeah.
So in this case, if we look at that, Denise, where do you see smart cities using this technology?
So I had it here, the 3D remote inspections, the sensors, the same streaming information could also capture audio, which can then be brought into these large language models to translate on the information, to put it on the record so that they can keep track of what's going on. If you're talking about architecture and as a house evolves, what did you discuss? I can't imagine, being in the city and having to deal with irate homeowners or built by owner people and having to deal with them. And it's like, we have transcripts of the discussion and everything we said, and it was automatically sent to you, and you were part of that discussion. And here it is, here's the before and here's the after, and being able to do that automatically.
So what we were working with the city of Coral Gables was to attach with it 3D modeling. They have already drones, and they're also considering using a ChatGPT, an Annie-like device there on their website, being able to think about their own data. Because what happens now with ChatGPT is people are afraid of what? Trust. Isn't that the case? People really, when we think about it, they're afraid of, can I trust it? They're going to take my data. So what we're getting is a request from the city of Coral Gables and other enterprises to think, how can I keep my data safe? How can it train the ChatGPT or any other types of models? How can it train on my data and get smarter? And then we can think about it even not being connected to the internet in the beginning, almost as an intranet, have my own employees just use it before we send it out to the world.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, I mean, we've all been giving away data for years. Every end user license agreement, every tweet, every Facebook post, every WhatsApp message, you're giving away your data for free, and that's what they're scraping. If you have a website on dog training, you just told them exactly your model for dog training, and it's being used in these foundation models. Now for what the cities need to do is they can keep their foundational models personal, right? They're taking the data, they're training it locally, and they keep that foundational model internally, like the intranet. Inside of Microsoft, we have our own version of ChatGPT. We have the GPT-4 version, which I really like, but then I'm safe. You know, like I use it a lot for coding. Hey, or like with my discussion with my manager, it was, that's not information I should put on ChatGPT-3 on that public model and let them use it and consume it. It could, you know, I could be violating confidential privilege in that aspect. So we have an internal model that I can give it my information, and I know it's not connected to the internet in any way, shape, or form. It's just only accessible by employees. So what stays in the company, what we put in there stays within the company.
Let me make a comment about code.
You need to.
I showed you the code before of an automated bot that is trading securities. The problem was that it takes a very skilled programmer to code it. Just like Denise said, I didn't demonstrate to you, but it costs thousands of dollars. I showed you an automated algorithm trading cryptocurrency before. Now you can ask ChatGPT or one of those, another one is Google Bard, generate the code for certain to trade Apple securities, and it will generate the code, and then somebody that doesn't know how to code can then handle it to a programmer that can tweak it and charge him a lot less because he doesn't write everything from scratch. It is already working, but it is not optimized for this particular time of the year or this particular security. You have to optimize it. If it is a cryptocurrency, it is different than commodities, and it is different than futures, and it is different than equities. And all of that has to be what is called optimized. But it is a lot cheaper to hire a programmer just to do this little segment at the end, as opposed to writing it from scratch.
And so I wanted to bring out to the audience, if you have any questions, if you've had any experience with any of this, any comments? So we...
Ask question. Raise your hand.
No questions?
Yes. Do you want, well, let's repeat the question. You want to repeat the question? You can start.
Okay, sorry, it wasn't live a second ago. Yeah, no LiDAR. It was pure photogrammetry, which is just math. It's just images. You could actually do it with your phone and objects. There's a bunch of different apps. I think there's one called Scan3D where you could take a mug and just go around with it. Obviously, a house is a little difficult to do the roof by yourself. So a drone helps, especially when you're talking about things that are very large. The challenges with photogrammetry versus LiDAR is lighting conditions is very important. So having no sunshine or no clouds, constantly changing the dynamic lighting in the environment. Yes, you saw the end result, but you didn't see the 5 other captures that came before that were absolutely disastrous because I learned a lot in the process.
Let me give you another example. My brother had a startup that sold to Intel Corporation for $16 billion, a company that was worth $0 before. The name of the company is Mobileye. Developed it in Israel, some professor in Jerusalem University, sold it to Intel for $15 billion, and then Intel bought it a couple of years ago, turned it around and made it public again for $32 billion. Now what's the story about it? These devices can help, because at the beginning, I used to drive, this is an autonomous vehicle, so my brother used to give us rides, and after a few minutes, you couldn't stand it anymore. We had to beg him to stop it because it will give you warning, false warning all the time, non-stop. But this little company that was worth nothing kept improving it and improving it until Intel bought them out for 16 billion, replicated it all over the world, applying it to drones and airplanes and all kinds of vehicles, and went public last year for 32 billion. And one of the ways to deal with it is to have remote engineers around the world looking at the driver while he drives the vehicle, let the vehicle drive autonomously, but tweak it and improve it and broadcast it from devices like that worldwide, so you can have a consensus of 50 engineers all over the world looking at the driver and at the device in real time and trying to tweak it in real time, reaching a consensus.
I think one thing I wanted to add to that, I think the point of the story there, Avi, is also iterating, right? Trying something, you know, for a city is put one foot in front of the other. I had no idea how to do a drone scan of my house, zero. Never had a desire in my life to fly a drone, you know, but I have this idea to bring, like, there's a long story, but Broward College has a technology bus, and they're like, we have drones, and we have all this technology, and now we don't know how to use it. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I connect your drones with the Quest 2 headsets and the Magic Leap 2 headsets and the HoloLens headsets that you have, so at least when you're playing with the technology, you have a cohesive story. And I'm like, oh, well, we could do, you know, the drones to take 3D models, right? So that was kind of the iteration loop. And then I found an organization down here who can put that model on the web. So now you can actually use a computer or a phone to also access the model that you created, or you can look at the hologram or look at it in VR. So the idea is you need to put one step forward, do a small project, do a small investment, do one thing, you know, find a pain point in your organization, small one, and try to solve for that using some of this technology. You learn so much from it, and over time you continue to iterate. You know, one big thing is never going to work. No technology company ever does one big thing. We do a lot of little things. A lot of them fail, and once or twice, you knock one of those things out of the park, and it just takes over.
So I think
$16 billion
Let me
worth.
just finish the story. So when my brother made so much money, all of a sudden he wanted to buy properties in the U.S., but he didn't want to come here. So he said, what can I do? I want to buy apartments in Miami. So I told him, you know what, we'll do an open house. I will go with the open house and I'll broadcast it live to Israel, and you can sit in Israel there and tell me what to do. So he sits there and he says, flush the toilet. I want to see the pressure in the toilet. Turn the hot water and put your hand and see if it is hot. So we implemented it. And another thing that I forgot to mention to you, if you looked on the slides, it had a vanity number. A vanity number in this case was 305 on trial. It is a telephone number that spells a domain name, in this case, ontrial.co. So this is for medical, clinical trials, and also trying new technologies like we are doing now.
So what we're trying, I think what we want to conclude, because they're going to take the stick and take us off the stage, but one of the things I wanted to say is, I agree with Denise, we've got to start small. We have to be innovative, but we can't do it alone. So what I think we urge you to do is, we at the University of Miami, Microsoft, FIU, other universities, we need to work together with the cities to make this a sustainable communities. And I thank you very much. Bernardo, I thank you very much for hosting us. He's done an excellent job, I think, of bringing us together, and also the city of Coral Gables. Thank you.
And I have several people in Edmundo, my student for 40 years ago, installed it on an iPhone, so you can see a demo on iPhone of callannie.ai, and she has a vanity number that spells the area code of 640, call Sam.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Matthew Anderson. He's Assistant Director of Mobility and Sustainability from the city of Coral Gables. He is going to talk about building a more resilient and sustainable city. Beautiful.
Please join me, give a hand to, what's the name again? Gianni here for getting all the cables. Working
The true MVP.
That's the real MVP.
That's the real MVP.
If we didn't have Gianni, we would be lost.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Matt Anderson. I'm the Assistant Director for Mobility and Sustainability for the City of Coral Gables. I know our city has been mentioned a lot as part of these presentations, and what I want to focus on as part of mine is talking about kind of our city's journey on sustainability and resiliency. Just as background, I've been with the city for 8 years. I was able to join the city in its first full-time sustainability position. So I was able to come in on the ground floor and really help launch the sustainability programs and initiatives in the city that I'm going to talk about. And you know, it's through partnerships, and Raimundo kind of touched on this as part of his presentation, but it's really about, you know, government gets a really bad rap of working in silos, right? We all work in our own departments. I can tell you that is not the case in the city of Coral Gables. We all work together. Sustainability, innovation, resiliency is all part of, it's kind of woven into the fabric of all of our city departments. And we work really closely together on making sure that we're carrying out the mission in building a more resilient and sustainable city. So I will start by talking about those that aren't familiar of where Coral Gables is. I always start off with a little framework. You know, we're right in the middle of Miami-Dade County. Most people don't know, you know, we were founded in 1925, so we're coming up on our 100-year anniversary as a city. We were actually one of the first planned cities in the entire United States, and you can kind of see that if you've, have driven through our city. You see our tree-lined streets. It really sets us apart, and really it's something that's been a priority. So sustainability was really started in our city very early on in our history, as far as having the trees lining our streets and the benefits that those provided to our communities, and then also just the way our city was planned out. And part of it is we are a coastal city, right? Most people don't realize we have over 37 miles of coastline, over 40 miles of coastline and waterway, actually, and over 35 miles of that is our waterways that we have running throughout our city. And they play a very rich history, a rich part in our history. We are one of only a few full-service cities. We provide our own police, our own fire, and our own garbage collection. We have over 50,000 residents, so we're a small to medium-sized city, and over 8,000 businesses, and our business district is a big part of our community. I talked about our tree canopy. We actually have the second largest tree canopy in the entire state of Florida, behind Gainesville. So we're at 41% tree canopy in our city, and it's something that we've been Tree City USA since 1985, something we're really proud of, and it's something that we prioritize in our city. We are actually, and this plays into a part in the resiliency conversation, we're also one of only 3 cities in the state of Florida that has a AAA bond rating. And I can tell you, when cities and bond rating agencies, what they're looking at right now, on top of your finances, what are you doing on resiliency? So a lot of what I'll be talking about plays a rich part in kind of how we're able to obtain that. And we were recently, about a year ago, achieved LEED for Cities Gold certification from the U.S. Green Building Council for a lot of the work that we've been able to accomplish. So our journey really started with the development of our sustainability management plan. We started developing this plan in 2015, and what it is it's a 10-year plan. So carrying us through our 100-year anniversary, in 2025, and it really set forth projects that we as a city were going to look at and trying to reduce our operational impacts on the environment. How are we going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, both community-wide and through our own operations? And the beauty of this is we brought in an outside consultant, but the projects, and there was over 25 of them that were included in our original sustainability management plan, were all developed by department directors. So we had that immediate buy-in on, okay, we need to look at our energy use, we need to look at our water use, we need to look at our fuel usage, our greenhouse gas emissions, our waste, how we're financing these projects, how we're going to do education and outreach, and build that into the projects that we wanted to incorporate into the city. And I'll talk about a number of them. But what we did was we looked at all those different focus areas and we said, okay, how are we going to set goals as a city for the next 10 years, and what are they going to be? So we sat down and we said, we want to reduce our operational impacts on the environment as much as we can. So we said, let's take 20% off our 2013 data, our baseline, which was the best year we had for energy, water use, and so on and so forth. And we said we want to reduce our consumption across the board by 20%. And that's how we started looking upon our journey. And within that, we said, as we started doing the finances of our sustainability management plan, again, the tree hugger that comes in like me, not only did it make sense environmentally, it made sense financially for us to be looking at sustainability and resiliency. So when we started putting our cost estimates together, it actually showed that we would have a 24% return on investment by the capital we'd be investing in these projects that we were identifying in the plan. So again, not only made sense environmentally, made sense financially. So for us, it was a win-win situation. So within that, we also looked at developing a greenhouse gas emission inventory. Like all cities are doing, you want to set forth goals based on your greenhouse gas emissions. So we did a baseline of 2013 and looked at our greenhouse gas emission inventories. And we looked at our government operations and our community-wide. So these charts you see in front of you of kind of our baseline of 2013. We then looked at 2017 and again looked at 2019. And what I'll tell you is, our two biggest sectors that we look at that contribute to our most greenhouse gas emissions are two. It's our commercial energy and it's transportation. And that is not any different than a lot of cities down here that do their greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation is one of your biggest, if not the biggest, greenhouse gas emitter in your region. And I think now in my new role, so going back a little bit, I started with the city as a sustainability specialist, and I've kind of moved my way up to resiliency and sustainability manager. To earlier this year, I actually was moved out of the public works department and was given an opportunity to not only bring the sustainability program with me, which I was a department of one, so brought everything with me, and able to build out my team, but now I oversee our alternative transportation options in the city. So our trolley service, our freebie, and looking at how we're gonna get people to transition from everyone going in your single occupant vehicle, which we've talked about throughout the day today, and how you're gonna encourage people and incentivize people to start using alternative transportation, right? So I think it puts me in a very unique situation to be able to not only put on the hat of looking at alternative transportation, but bringing sustainability into that conversation as well, because it's really, really important to have that connection between the two. So this is where we stand right now. So our progress to date. I'm actually happy, really happy to report that on our community-wide emissions, we've actually already met our goal. Doesn't mean we want to stop there, right? We want to reduce our operational impacts as much as possible. So we've been able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from the community-wide perspective by over 20%. Focusing on our city facilities, we've actually been able to lower our energy consumption per square foot within our own city facilities by over 14%. So we're almost to our goal. We've been able to reduce water use by over 25% by easy measures. I mean, with lighting, with energy, switching lights to LEDs, putting motion sensors in, really simple stuff, right? Water, putting in water-efficient fixtures into our city facilities, things you can do at home that have these quick return on investment. And that's something for me that I wanted to prioritize. Similar to what Raimundo was talking about earlier, is we want to invest in opportunities that give us that quick ROI so we can then show proof of concept of like, look, the investments that we as a city are making in sustainability and resiliency are paying back immediately. And then we can therefore get additional capital to be able to invest in maybe longer term paybacks, such as renewable energy, that sometimes those paybacks are a little bit longer than just switching out lights. And what we've also been able to do, and my presentation, by the way, is all slides, all pictures, is we started looking at our policies in the city and said, what can we do not only to lead by example in our own city facilities, but how can we work with the private developers and within our community and incentivize more sustainable practices. So we said, as an elected body, we looked at our policies and said, let's look at our green building policy. We didn't have one at the time. So we said, you know what, we want to pass a green building policy. So therefore in 2016, we passed a policy where any facility in the city that's built, whether it's private or whether it's our own city facility, that's 20,000 square feet and above, needs to be built to LEED Silver or equivalent. So kind of the gold standard when it comes to green building, making sure that the facilities that have these long lifespans are being built to be energy efficient, water efficient, resilient. So I'm proud to say that our new public safety building that came online about 1.5 to 2 years ago, which is where Raimundo and our IT division is located, is housed in a LEED Silver certified building. And also this serves as our emergency operations center. So it needed to be built as resilient as possible to withstand what we know is future storms that could impact our area. Also, where my new office is in our trolley building, where we run our alternative transportation service out of. That was also built to LEED Silver. And I can say that there's a number of other projects on the private side, large developments that have been coming into our city that are being built to those high environmental standards as well. So for us, it's about having that impact and seeing that decrease in energy and water use and overall greenhouse gas emissions. We also said, as far as incentivizing local businesses, when I came to the city, my background, by the way, I was born and raised here in South Florida, so I always tell people this is not only a profession for me, this is personal. I have an invested interest in this area, and you know, for me, it's always, my background's in environmental education, so for me, there's always needs to be an education component to everything we're doing within our initiatives, right? So making sure that we're effectively communicating not only to our residents, to our businesses, to our visitors, about the work that we're doing, but also having those two-way conversations on bringing ideas into our city, because we may not have all the solutions. I think, you know, as a region, we talk about the impacts of climate change, and, you know, we talk about flooding, we talk about sea level rise, we talk about heat now more, and how hot it is, you know, it gets down here, and it's all about working with the community. We may not have the solution to what, you know, is out there right now for dealing with sea level rise or dealing flooding, and I think, you know, when we talk about innovation and we talk about climate tech, I don't think there's any better place to be than South Florida when it comes to resiliency and the role that innovation can play in that, in coming up with these solutions that we want to deal with as far as that goes. But something going back to working with our businesses, I work really closely with our economic development team and our Chamber of Commerce. And what we did is we got together and I brought the idea to the city, let's create a green business certification program. I want to go out into our community. I want to learn from our businesses what they're doing. And I want to educate them on different actions they can take. But I also want them to educate us on the work that they're doing, because I think there's no better platform than our city to be able to share and create this community of businesses talking to one another, right? Like, you know, a restaurant, they talk their own language to each other, right? And you have, you know, and we've been able to certify over 10 businesses in our city to date since we launched this program a couple years ago, including the University of Miami, which came in at our highest level of platinum because of all the great work that they're doing. But I really wanted to create this network of these businesses talking to one another. And through that, I've been able to talk to a paperless law firm, right? You think law firm, you think paper, right? Like, learn that we had a law firm in our city that was actually paperless and was doing everything digital. And, you know, a waterless car washing, mobile detailing company. Like, so there was already this innovation going on within our city that by creating these platforms and these businesses coming to us and applying to be a part of this, we were creating this network of businesses and entities talking to one another and sharing best practices. Something else we did looking at our policies is we said, let's look at our city permit fees. Where can we make it easier and more affordable for people to go sustainable, to be more sustainable and more resilient? So we waived city permit fees for solar PV, for energy upgrades. We said we want to make it easy for folks. We want to incentivize people and developers and everyone to be as sustainable as possible. So we did that. And then we started looking at, okay, how are we going to look at renewable energy, right? So we looked at, and Raimundo had a picture of we were one of the first cities, if not the first in the region, to install solar charging benches in our parks. And, you know, it was a great thing. We had a great ribbon cutting, but I really wanted to educate our community on this is a layer of resiliency, right? If we have a storm and you lose commercial power, you don't have a generator, you need to make a phone call, you need to charge an electronic device, iPad, phone, whatever, you can go to one of these charging stations in our parks and be able to do that. So it's not only great during regular times, but also after, and it again, small little steps, although it may seem, builds in those additional layers of resiliency, right? And then we're looking at, this is a depiction of what may be a future building in our city, which is called a mobility hub. So in my new role, looking at mobility and how we're moving people around our city and how we could effectively do that. And this building, you know, if it comes to fruition, and we're looking at solar PV on the roof, a park on the roof, looking at the future of mobility, autonomous vehicles, EV charging, which I'll talk about on my next slide, and incorporating all of that into design of our future facilities and making sure that they're being built, like I said, as sustainable and resilient as possible. Waste diversion. People talk about sustainability. It's always two things they want to talk about first, trees and recycling. And we could talk about recycling forever, right? So actually in our city, we're doing recycling pretty unique. We actually, most places around the county, you have the bin that you tip, you put your stuff out in the recycle, the truck comes by, it tips it in. In our city, we actually, and it's much more labor intensive, we actually have, I think somebody mentioned it as part of their talk earlier, the garbage men that are on the back of the truck and they come and we have that in our city, and we collect our recycling, providing side door service. So our residents, in the single family residential homes don't even have to touch their recycling. They put it in their bin and our crew comes around and does it. I did it one morning as an experiment. I ran 13 miles that morning picking up recycling. So it is very labor intensive, but I'll tell you what, the big benefit of it, besides our community does cherish that level of service, our residential recycling contamination rate, so items that are ending up in the bin that shouldn't be there, is 8%. In most recycling operations, your contamination is 50%, 30 to 50%, which means there's so much stuff getting in there that half of that recycling load is contaminated. Therefore, more than likely, it might be ending up in the garbage as opposed to getting to the recycling facility, right? So for us, at 8%, it's also allowed us where we don't have to pay to process our recycling. Some other cities are paying $100 to $140 a ton because of that contamination being that high. In our city, through the way we collect, through the education that we do, and you can see examples of that, we wanted to create a way for us to make sure that our recycling is getting processed as cleanly as possible. We also wanted to make it easy for our residents and our visitors to be able to create programs, because look, people want to do right by the environment, right? Nobody wants to harm the environment, but you also have to make it easy and convenient for them. So we wanted to put programs in place, such as becoming the first city to establish a prescription drug disposal program. So in our public safety building, you can come in and drop off your unwanted prescription drugs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we work with Covanta, and they get taken to the waste-to-energy plant that's in Doral to be incinerated, instead of contaminating our water supply or ending up in that situation or harming the environment. Looking at alternative transportation, and this is, like I said, a very, very important topic, is providing excellent alternative transportation. I could tell you our trolley service, we were one of the first to establish this trolley service over 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20-year anniversary. And I'm a little biased, but I have been told that we do run the best trolley service in the entire region. And we are now on track to get back to over 1 million passengers a year that use our free trolley service. We run 2 fixed routes up and down our Ponce corridor and down along Grand Avenue. And we're going to be expanding at the end of the month on Saturdays to run over to the University of Miami and connecting our 2 business districts, both in the central part of our downtown and down now by Sunset, down and around Sunset Place, where we have an expanding businesses. So again, offering more and more alternative transportation options for folks to feel comfortable to move around our city. And I think with our tree-lined streets, we have the perfect community to be able to move people around effectively doing that. We also have micro-mobility programs and scooter rental programs, and also our freebie service that runs around. And again, the freebie and the trolley are free to use. So it's equitable, and that's something we talk about in sustainability, is making sure practices that we're putting in place are equitable and affordable for all. And that's something that's a big priority for us in our city as well. You can see how we're utilizing technology and the partnerships we have with Raimundo and his team. And we have our trolley tracker. So anyone that wants to get on our trolley, they can pull it up, see exactly where that trolley is based on GPS. It'll tell you the capacity of the trolley at that point to see if the trolley is full. It'll also tell you if there's wheelchair availability on the trolleys, or if you're riding your bike and you want to connect to the trolley, that there's a bike rack available for you. We have bike racks on all of our trolleys, but we have 2 spots for them to be able to put it. So you're seeing really real time the impacts, and the service that we have. And we also have our QR code where people can go and scan and find that and download that app, or just look at it real time. And our trolley service and our alternative transportation is all funded through the half-penny tax that comes through the county. And it's something we really, really appreciate. EV charging, this is something that we're really, really proud of. We actually have the largest public electric vehicle fleet in the state of Florida in our city. We have over 70 EVs in our fleet. We started purchasing electric vehicles in 2016. And we looked at all of our administrative vehicles, our non-rescue recon vehicles, and just immediately started purchasing electric vehicles, and it's been the perfect fit in our city, and it's something we're really, really proud of. We've seen our fuel usage continue to drop, but also, too, having that infrastructure in place to make people comfortable with switching to electric vehicles. So we have over 30 charging points that we manage as a city, And we're getting ready to expand next month with one of our garages opening. It has 26 charging points in there, so up to 56. And through the mobility hub and a few other projects, we're anticipating over 250 charging points just in our city, that is 14 square miles, available to the public. So making it easy and accessible for folks to be able to utilize these alternative fuel technologies. Resiliency, the other big part of what we talk about, right? What are we focusing on as a city? And I'll tell you, from a resiliency perspective, we're looking at flooding, we're looking at, planning for that next storm that we know will eventually come, sea level rise, heat. I mean, it's so much that we're looking at. So what we said is, look, we want to start looking at what can we do right now as far as planning goes, as far as what plans can we put in place to help make our city more resilient. So we joined the South Florida Regional Climate Compact, which I was involved in my previous work in Broward County, which is actually Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties all working together. I think it's been over the last 15, 16 years, all working together, and all the municipalities working together to come up with policies and just planning for resiliency and sea level rise. That had never been done in the entire country. It was a model that started here in South Florida, and it's something that's very important for all the cities to have a role in playing in that. So we joined the compact. That was actually one of the first things I recommended when I joined the city 8 years ago, and we were able to do that. We've done vulnerability assessments looking at what is the impact of sea level rise and flooding and king tides going to have on our infrastructure as a city, our roads, our buildings, and so on and so forth, our public safety infrastructure, our pump stations. How is that going to be affected by future projections of sea level rise? We were one of the first cities to complete a vulnerability assessment. We're actually getting ready to start another one now to comply with the new state requirements. One thing that's really unique, and I think we were the first in the entire country to do this, we established a sea level rise mitigation fund. So we looked at our partners in Miami and Miami Beach. They've taken out $400 million bonds, $200 million bonds to be able to start upgrading their infrastructure, right? So we said, you know what? We need to start setting aside money now as a city for future commissions to be able to utilize for matching grants, whatever it may be, just infrastructure. So I'm proud to say that in 2017, and this is very forward thinking on behalf of our leadership, because most cities at the end of the budget year, you're just trying to balance your budget, right? Our city is saying, no, not only are we going to balance our budget and be fiscally responsive, we're going to set money aside for future commissions to be able to access, to be able to pay for what we know is going to be costly for upgrading our infrastructure. That does not mean we're not upgrading right now. We are through our capital improvement programs, but we're setting aside money now. And I'm proud to say right now we have about $13 million in that fund. As of the end of the next month, I believe another $3 or $4 million are going into that fund. The goal is to have $100 million in that fund by 2040. But again, still putting that out through our capital improvement plan and being able to fund, upgrades as we see impacts within our community. We're also going through the process, and you can see right here, the picture on the right is a new pump station that we opened about 1.5 years ago, that, we rebuilt it in one of our communities, and we built it to the highest environmental standards. We were able to follow Envision, which is basically like LEED, but for public works and public infrastructure projects, and we were able to build that to the first pump station in the state of Florida to be built to Envision standards. Water quality, that's a big thing we're all talking about right now, right? Like we see, algae blooms that are happening, in Biscayne Bay and some of our waterways. And like I said, we have over 35 miles of waterways in our city. So we've been working with our local universities, and I can't speak highly enough about our local universities, FIU, Miami-Dade, being able to utilize the expertise in those universities and being able to partner with them and doing these innovative water quality projects. Our city's been measuring our water quality over the last 2 years and coming up with land-based management strategies to help reduce the amount of nutrients that are ending up in our waterways and making that data all available to the public through our Smart City platform. We've also worked with graduate students that wanted to look at nature-based solutions, and we did a floating wetlands project where they put plants on these floating mats, and we're measuring nutrient uptake and seeing how nature can help us solve these problems, right? So it's not always gray infrastructure, it can be green infrastructure and how we respond to some of these issues. Again, Smart City, Raimundo talked about this at length, and just making sure that all this data, and this is all the water quality stuff, is being measured and made available to the public. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, education and outreach, right? Making sure that we're working with our community, working with our businesses, working with our residents. So we launched the Keep Coral Gables Beautiful program 3 years ago. It's affiliated with Keep America Beautiful, focused on litter prevention, sustainability, recycling. And I can tell you over the last 3 years, we've been really, really busy. We've hosted over 107 events, including this past weekend. We had International Coastal Cleanup. We've collected over 600,000 pounds of litter from our waterways, from the community, and we've had almost 17,000 people participate in our program. So really activating our community, activating our businesses, activating our residents and our visitors, and coming in and playing a part in the solutions that we're looking at. And you can see some of the programs we've done: battery recycling, a reverse vending machine, where people can come and deposit their plastic and their aluminum cans and actually get rewards to our local businesses. And we've done that through grants we've received. And you can see these pictures here of just, a lot of the work that we've been doing and getting out and really getting our hands dirty and getting out there and helping clean up our community. So it's something that we're really, really proud of. I know I might have gone over a little bit, but happy to answer any questions after the talk. But thank you for the opportunity for us to be here today, and it's really exciting to hear everybody, talk about in the sphere of smart cities and sustainability. And thank you.
The city of Coral Gables is doing really a very good job, and the team of Coral Gables received yesterday the Sustainable Award for the great job they are doing. Right now, I invite Alan Scott, Director of Sustainability from Intertek, located in Portland, and he's going to talk about resilient urban environments. Disasters are the hazard you didn't prepare for. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Make sure I understand. So good afternoon. My name is Alan. Part of my being is as an architect who loves creative problem solving. I also work as a consultant serving sustainable, healthy, and resilient built environment projects. So I'm excited to be here with all of you wonderful people here today to share my perspectives on how a resilient city is a smart city. And I gotta figure out which button to push. There we go. So words matter. Disaster implies something that is you can't anticipate and is unavoidable. I prefer the word hazard because hazards can be anticipated and planned for to minimize risk and prevent them from becoming disasters. The trouble is that we're not very good at identifying, judging, and acting on risk. Did you know that 54% of Americans are afraid of sharks? This is likely due to sensationalism of shark attacks in entertainment and news media. But this is not a disaster we're likely to face. The reality is only about 6 unprovoked shark attack fatalities happen in the entire world every year. So it's very minimal. On the other hand, humans kill over 100 million sharks per year, so they have far more reason to be afraid of us than we are of them. But that's another talk. By contrast with this de minimis risk, every day in the United States alone, approximately 8 people are killed due to distracted driving. Now, while many of us may be concerned about this, it's not enough to cause us to cease driving, and more importantly, not enough for us to stop our own bad habits of distracted driving as well because of it. This contrast illustrates 2 key concepts of behavioral science that I first heard articulated by Dr. Paul Slavin from the University of Oregon. The first is the availability heuristic, which describes our tendency to judge the probability and the probability and frequency of events by either our ability to imagine them happening or to remember them happening in the past. So imaginability and memorability are a shorthand for us to judge the likelihood of an event happening. The second is optimism bias, which leads us to underestimate the potential of bad things happening to ourselves compared to the risk of them happening to someone else. So it's not that we're overall not good at estimating the probability of something, it's that we discount the potential threat to ourselves. So, what these two concepts illustrate is that we tend to make judgments about risk based on feelings as opposed to data. This serves us well most of the time because we don't have the time or ability to calculate the speed and distance of cars speeding down the road when we're wanting to cross a busy street. And we don't have the ability to make engineering calculations on a rickety ladder before we choose to climb it or not. But sometimes these gut level assessments steer us wrong. And certainly that's the case related to climate change and our inability as individuals and collectively to acknowledge and act on the risks of climate change. This is partly due that even though climate change is an existential threat to human civilization, the impacts are often described as events in the far distant future, like sea level rise at the end of the century. That's too distant and too removed from our experience for us to process it and act on it accordingly. But the truth is that climate change is here and now. Case in point, the deadly heat domes that lingered over, for weeks over much of the northern hemisphere for this last summer. 2023 is now officially the hottest summer ever recorded. So the frequency and severity of natural hazards has been increasing significantly. And as we see in the last few years, just in the United States, the number of billion-dollar plus disasters has significantly increased. And just through August of this year, we've already broken previous records for billion-dollar disasters, and we still have 4 months to go in that accounting. While individual hazard events can't be attributed, this trend clearly is linked to climate change. So think about it. This represents billions of dollars and, more importantly, numerous lives and livelihoods literally and figuratively washed away. So the challenge is, even in the face of this in-your-face risk, we tend not to be able to process and act on these risks accordingly and make appropriate judgments both as individuals and as a community. And I see that problem, the problem, even when we do acknowledge that risk, as there's three shortcomings. The first is that we tend to build our emergency management systems around events that have happened in the past. So we're driving rapidly towards a brave new world of climate change, looking squarely in the rearview mirror. The second is that we tend to focus our preparedness for hazards on individual hazards, failing to recognize the compounding and cascading impacts of interrelated hazards. Let me share with you an example. Long-term drought, which is becoming more common, can oftentimes occur simultaneously with high heat events. The shortage of water in a drought can cause thermal power plants to have to be shut down for lack of cooling water, leading to blackouts, just at the time when we have greater demand for air conditioning during the high heat event. Also, high heat events can sometimes spawn serious storms that spark wildfires with lightning or down power lines that also shut off the power. Those wildfires threaten structures locally and create hazardous air quality in a much broader region around there, creating a mixture of cascading and compounding events, making matters worse. Now, unfortunately, the tragedy recently in Lahaina is a heartbreaking example of this interrelated hazards making matters worse for people, and other examples are abundant. The third shortcoming we have in this process is that we tend to focus on acute events and ignore the chronic events that are slowly developing, like those associated with climate change. Mexico City, for example, has done made a lot of efforts to prepare itself for earthquakes, but has not fully acknowledged the increasing and looming threat of a water scarcity crisis. If trends continue, Mexico City is going to face its zero water day in 5 years or less, but the adoption of water saving and water conservation technologies is still uncommon in the city. So in addressing this, climate advocates oftentimes debate, should we focus more on climate change mitigation or climate change adaptation, with mitigation proponents suggesting that embracing adaptation means that we're giving up on the ability to prevent climate change from happening. In reality, we need to do both, and as quickly as possible. And for this, we need a new approach. The benefit is that there's numerous complementary strategies that both simultaneously build resilience and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But with this, we need to leave behind these gut-level risk assessments and think instead in a systems manner, looking at coordinated efforts between public and private entities using high-quality data. This process starts with a fundamental risk and vulnerability assessment. Now, risk is a factor of magnitude of consequence combined with probability, and vulnerability is our exposure to the hazard event and our ability to either mitigate or magnify the vulnerability based on our capacity to adapt. So to illustrate these points, let's go back to our examples of shark attacks and distracted driving. There's no doubt that a shark attack would be severe. I mean, just look at the teeth. But the probability is very low, as we know from statistics, and so overall our risk is low. Unless we spend many of our days spearfishing in prime shark habitat, our exposure is fairly low to this occurrence happening to us. And we can take measures to keep ourselves safe, so our vulnerability is overall low. Now, when we look at distracted driving, generally the impact on us or others in an accident is very high, and the probability is medium to high of this happening, so overall we have a higher risk of this happening. In terms of exposure, unless we never drive, bike, or walk down a road, we have exposure to distracted driving. So our exposure is high. And while we can adopt behaviors to try to keep ourselves safe, we cannot control the behaviors, the bad behaviors of other drivers. And so overall, we have a medium to high vulnerability in this regard. Now, assessing risk and vulnerability is only the start. The next step is that we need to think about our collective public and private efforts to build resilience based on the assessment. The trouble is, we often do this in a siloed approach, not coordinated. In the absence of a public initiative for resilience, Some entities, private entities, might invest in their own resilience. They could come through a hazard event unscathed, but then find themselves castaways surrounded by a devastated community. Conversely, public entities can invest in hardening their infrastructure and emergency management plans, but households and businesses probably won't follow suit. This is because they don't perceive the full extent of the risk, they lack the resources to invest in preparation, and they assume that government or insurance will take care of them if something bad does happen, which isn't always the case. So there's little value in resilient infrastructure if there's no community left to serve. So with this, we need to, when we're thinking about resilience, we need a systems approach that involves coordinated public and private efforts, and without that, we don't have true resilience. So with the lack of coordination, after a hazard event, a community will tend to spiral down. Homeowners and businesses find that they're uninsured or underinsured. They lack the resources to invest in rebuilding, and many of them will leave. This results in a reduced tax base, and then public services and infrastructure suffer. The community begins to look risky to investors and insurance companies, and further declines. But most importantly, even if a community is able to rebuild, the pressure is on to do it really quickly. And so with limited time and money, rebuilding usually happens to the current state as opposed to with resilience enhancements, setting the stage for another disaster. Alternatively, with a proactive approach to resilience, we can attract investment and growth, manage risk, and build greater prosperity within the community. The road to recover, though, can be really long, and especially in a low resilience community, and this is a significant drag on the sort of economic momentum of a community. One example of this is the Christchurch Oturoa earthquake in 2011. While there are only 2 buildings in the central business district collapsed in that earthquake, causing most of the 185 fatalities claimed by the earthquake, all the remaining buildings were left standing. Sorry for the pause here. We didn't have a resilient clicker. That is a disaster because I did not prepare for it. Thanks for asking. The rest of the story is told by these 2 images we see here. The one on the left shows the city 1 month afterwards when all the remaining buildings were left standing. However, those buildings served their purpose, built with life safety code. They stood up and kept the people safe inside, but 70% of them were damaged beyond repair and had to be demolished. So 5 years on, as we see in the image on the right, the downtown has been scraped clean, and along with it, its vitality. Uh-oh. Oops. I gave away the punchline on that one. So, okay, so now I got the right ones. Apologize for, I've got it set. building to code is not the same as resilience. Thank you. Building to code is not the same as resilience. Code is a minimum standard to protect life safety during a hazard event and does not define optimal performance. It's kind of like the design of modern automobiles with crumple zones in the frame. The frame absorbs the impact of the collision, preserving the passengers in the car from the worst of it, but the car is totaled afterwards, irreparable. So we don't have to accept minimum standards. Communities can proactively identify risks and vulnerabilities, both current and emerging, prioritize action, and build support. Then they can push efforts forward through carrots and sticks, mandates and incentives, and seeking alternative funding to create high resilience communities. These high resilience communities, after a hazard event, can bounce back quickly, getting back to normal, and even rebuilding with greater resilience over time. This compared to a low resilience community that must face a long and arduous journey back to just normal conditions. Or worse yet, a community with little or no resilience that may never recover. An example of a community's multi-stakeholder and resilience initiatives is the San Francisco Bay Area. That is both predicted to, has a 72% chance of a devastating earthquake in the next 20 years, and has 650 kilometers of urban shoreline vulnerable to sea level rise. A particular area of vulnerability is the San Francisco Embarcadero that has a 100-year-old seawall built on silt. In a major earthquake, that seawall is going to topple and part of the financial district is going to slide into the bay if rising seas don't breach the wall first. Multiple public entities are engaging with private stakeholders in an aggressive effort to rebuild a resilient waterfront, and that is what I call a smart city investment. So the National Institutes of Building Science estimates that for every dollar we invest in resilience, we save $4 to $7 or more after a hazard event. The important thing is that this investment needs to be made in the mitigation measures that are most effective to meet the specific hazards and risks that a community or an individual building faces. For this, we need smart technologies like the risk footprint tool that I've been using that pull actionable data at a granular scale to pinpoint vulnerabilities and help guide choices about resilience measures. One example of this is related to flood maps. In this, the upper image is a FEMA flood map that shows limited risk from riverine flooding on the subject property. The map on the bottom is a Fathom map that shows some significant risk from flooding from severe or heavy rainfall. This data wouldn't necessarily have been identified in typical flood risk assessment, so we need to pull data quickly from multiple sources to inform decisions. A second example illustrates the need to not just look at current and past history, but also at future expectations. This current property is experiencing only 8 days of very minor coastal flooding currently, but in less than 20 years is expected to have 85 days of significant coastal flooding every year, meaning that people will need kayaks as opposed to cars to access the property. Similarly, looking forward, we can look at other examples. The frequency and severity of tornadoes has been increasing in this country, and the geographic area of Tornado Alley has been expanding. So areas that have not experienced tornadoes or not frequently will see them more frequently, and they need to be prepared. Using this data from risk assessment, we can then inform integrated design process to identify sustainable design measures that increase resilience and also mitigate climate change. And I want to share a few examples of those as we close out today. Extreme heat events is one of the most deadly and ubiquitous threats from climate change. We're going to see a lot more of that in many locations, and we need to address it. We can do this through coordinated efforts to reduce urban heat islands, and at the same time focus on adapting buildings with passive thermal resilience strategies to reduce their demand for air conditioning that then reduces the energy and carbon emissions associated with powering that air conditioning. Hazard events oftentimes occur with power outages, and this can at best be a delay to recovery, and at worst be a deadly occurrence without power for necessary life sustaining systems. With distributed renewable energy systems and energy storage, we can provide backup power to allow for continuity of operations after a hazard event. And on the good days, we've got clean, cheap, renewable power to move us forward on our daily lives. And in a similar way, hazard events can knock out municipal water and waste systems, and leaving us vulnerable. With an integrated approach to water conservation technologies within and outside of buildings, combined with water use and storage systems, we can provide drought resilience for our buildings for long-term drought. We can then also be prepared for hydration and sanitation needs immediately after a hazard event, and reduce the day-to-day environmental impacts of municipal large water and waste systems. So in conclusion, making our cities and the buildings within them more resilient is not necessarily cheap or easy, but it is much less expensive and less disruptive to take a proactive, coordinated, and systematic approach to build resilience before a hazard occurs, instead of waiting for a disaster and scrambling to pick up the pieces. We can do this with gathering and assessing appropriate risk, and then working together to address that risk. And so I leave you with, isn't that the essence of a smart city? Thank you. Yes. The second to last picture when I talked about water? Yeah. Unfortunately, that's a stock photo that. It's a living machine at Oberlin College. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm. To me, it's the high water mark for sustainability. That we can treat our black water naturally with more resiliency. So I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm glad you pointed that out. I wasn't going to get into all the details of that, but I think it's great to. And there are other people had followed suit after the Oberlin project to.
Let's continue the conversation. Yeah. It's very important. Yeah. You start. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Very good. Now I invite Pamela Hamblin. She's the Business Development Manager for Select Power Systems. And she's going to talk about energy, renewable integration, and grid stability. Please, welcome.
Thank you, Bernardo. Hey, you guys. Okay, I'm going to break it up a little bit, and I'm a little bit more informal with my conversation. The first thing I want to say, there's not a ton of women in here, so women that are in this industry, go. I'm super excited that Alan shared that this hot summer is not just because I'm getting old and hot flashes. I've been like, why am I turning my AC down so low? It's so hot. And I also, his discussion reminded me of a discussion I was in years ago with American Electric Power, and their keynote speaker was an author of a book called Inviting Disaster. And he looked at multiple industries, like airline incidences and things where really disasters and catastrophes happen. And it's not just one incident that lines up. It's a number of different things that line up that we just don't pay attention to. And there's a known fact that we don't change, like human nature, we don't change until we get uncomfortable enough to change. And so what I love about what Bernardo is doing here is that he's invited all of these different perspectives into the sustainability conversation, because it takes a tribe. I'm American Indian by nature, and we live by a tribal community. It's a drumbeat that I wish all of us would beat to. It takes a tribe to make a community work. And that means it brings architects together, it brings engineers together, it brings energy to the conversation, it brings community to the conversation, it brings transportation to the conversation. It's all those different things need to come together for us to find a solution that works. So I'm going to talk a little bit off on power and back to kind of where we began. So historically, long time ago, about 150 years ago, we started putting power onto a grid. And our energy was and has been pretty much produced by a centralized location. So we would typically have a coal-fired unit or a gas-fired unit, and those units produce on average about 500 megawatts apiece. And with that, 500 megawatts would supply an entire community, an entire city with power. And now and that was designed for one-way traffic. So I was talking earlier at lunch about Bodie, California. Has anybody ever been there? Bodie, California. So it was one of the original coal mining cities. It's a ghost town now. It's a dirt road to get out there. And I went there and I was like, this is really weird. There's like these power lines coming over the mountains, like the most difficult direction you could get power going came to this town. And I asked the tour guide, I'm like, why is that this way? And he said, well, 150 years ago, they didn't know power could turn corners, you know? So they just went in a straight line. And that's the same grid we're still dealing with today. Our national grid, although it's divided, is still based on one-way traffic. Energy is energy. You send it down a line. You try to send it against each other, it's a different, you have an argument with somebody, that's energy going against each other. We're putting arguments onto our grid right now. We're sending energy in a different direction. And so we're having to switch how we're doing business, how we're doing things, and we're getting uncomfortable enough to look at that. So we're going from a single line highway to this. This is an argument like you never want to have. That's like a divorce waiting to happen right there, right? So we're having to harness these renewable sources that are now in a distributed situation. If we look at it like a spider web is how I like to use the analogy. So the main, thicker lines of a spider web are our transmission lines. And the little ones that connect all those big lines is our distribution lines. So we are now taking thousands of small little lines and trying to put them onto those big lines as opposed to the big lines going out to the little lines. Does that make sense? Raise of hands. Anybody? Okay. So it's unpredictable, multi-directional highway. It's like having, you don't know what she's coming home with after she went shopping all day long, you don't know. So it's a fluctuation that we have to determine whether or not we want to have the argument or not. So it gets a little confusing when we're dealing with utilities. And I've worked with utilities for 25 years. I've spoke with Congress on behalf of the ASME, Mechanical Engineering Society, as well as IEEE, the Electrical Engineering Society. So there's multi-different things that go into this, and our grid is based on regulated, deregulated power, as well as interconnection regions. That might not be important to some, but it is important to understand when you're putting renewable generation resources onto the grid, why do you have to go through all of this litigation, 3 to 5 years of getting it approved? And why is it a problem? Why do the utilities care? Well, they care because they have to manage demand. And EV charging, by the way. EV charging, crypto mining, all these things are putting higher demand on that grid. And we're going to utilize more and more of that and need to understand what does that mean to demand. Okay, so the utilities have to provide the energy, but not be able to really manage the energy. Does that make sense? We don't know how many cars are coming onto the grid. We don't know how many crypto mining is going on. So it's important for the utilities to be able to manage this so that we can keep the lights on, so that, you know, they don't have to do controlled brownouts. That would make us all uncomfortable enough to make a change, right? Anybody? Anybody agree? You start getting your electricity turned off because they need the demand for something more important, we're going to get it uncomfortable. So we have to be able to manage the consumption and manage the generation. What gets scary, if I can get this to go, is the challenges that utilities are facing. And this is just really, it is where we've been and where we're at, but I think it's important for everybody to really understand the dynamics that we're involved in right now with our traditional generation capabilities. So the management of the demand is important. I want to move that sign so I can see my slide. I'll look over there. So I'm like, I can't see. I'm going to look around. You guys will think I'm just being dramatic, but so we have aging legacy. I'll just go. I'm just going to keep you guys all interested and do like one of those. So there are aging legacy assets, and this is the part that everybody really needs to understand. The coal units that we had in place that we've known forever, they were installed 60, 70 years ago. That was their longevity that they were predicted for. That's how they were designed. And they were designed to operate on a base load, meaning, anybody ever drive a Volkswagen in like a cold environment like Iowa or something like that? Nobody? Okay, so if you were to take your vehicle and go 0 to 30 in like, or 0 to 60 in 30 seconds, would you crack your block? Maybe. Anybody? If you like just slammed it in a cold environment, you gotta heat the engine up. Everybody knows that, right? And if you're driving a stick shift and you try to skip a gear or two, anybody ever drive a stick? Get lazy? Just go from first to third? Okay, so this is what the utilities are doing. One, they're now cycling their units. So they're driving in New York traffic instead of, Iowa open roads. They're responding to demand, and they're cycling these units on and off, which is aging the facility dramatically, exponentially. And they're skipping gears because they can't get to 0 to 60 fast enough. Anybody following me on that? Okay. The units are at the end of life. They're skipping gears, and they're trying to race on a track that their cars aren't designed for. Same with gas. Gas facilities were designed for 30-year life. Guess what? Most of those were installed in the 80s. They're all at end of life. Our centralized units are at end of life. They're the ones that provide our baseload power. In order for us to put decentralized power onto the grid, we got to work a lot faster than we've been working. Or we have to build new units. The problem lies within our grid. And first of all, let's talk about coal. These numbers are a little outdated. What they're doing right now is they're extending the life of these units. We're going to have some problems. We're going to have some problems. So 230 coal-powered, this was about in 2021, that was 23% of the capacity. We have decommissioned about 40% of those, and about 60% of the remaining ones are slated for decommissioning between now and 2030. So most of those are going to be gone. Legacy, like I said, they do about 500 megawatts apiece. The typical distributed energy that we can put on, like a microgrid or something like that, is about 500 kilowatts, which is half of a megawatt. So when we think about 500 megawatts, that's an awful lot of distributed energy that we got to replace. They can't take these off the grid until we replace the energy. So this conference is being Smart City is really how do we do the things to not only look towards the future, but also protect our current, our present. How do we power the things that we're putting into place? How do we make sure that we don't invite disaster? So this might be a little off topic somewhat, but it is what companies have to go through in order to get power approved if you're going to go on grid. So when you look at this, this over here, there are interconnected regions. So parts of our nation are only connected with one another. Other parts are only connected within them. So if you guys remember a couple of years ago in Texas, I'm from Texas, and we like to think that we can do everything on our own. but you know, when Texas had the power outages, and they were without power for weeks and weeks and weeks, my parents were without power, and everybody thought, why can't they just get it from somewhere else? It's because they're on their own grid. They're isolated. They're an island on their own. So each of those little territories are their own grid. They can transmit power only within their little territories. Switch over to the other map, that's wholesale. So years and years and years ago, we went from a regulated electricity to a deregulated system. Deregulation meant power was bought and sold like this. So before, regulated, power plants produced power, they put it right to the local utility sold directly to the consumer. If you're in a regulated territory like Florida is still regulated, which is good, you're getting it straight from your power company. If you're deregulated, so all those colors on the map, those are deregulated territories. Those companies, the power plants produce the power. It's sold to the electric supplier. The electric supplier sells it to, I'm going to call it like energy markets, basically. So, you know, when you trade money on your investments, it's like that. It's basically like a stock market of energy. And whoever the cheapest supplier of power is who gets the bid for the day. And you're the one that's selling the power. If you don't sell the power, if you can't produce the power you said you were going to, you get penalized drastically. So a deregulated market is very difficult to get your renewable resources integrated onto because it has to be approved by interconnection and the market. To sell into a market, if you're in a deregulated market, there's a few different things that come into it. So energy is basically a commodity. There are requirements for ramping. Like I said, you've got to go 0 to 60 in 30 seconds. And you've got to do that multiple times a day. And if you can't, you don't win the bid. And right now, the way that those wholesale markets are working is that coal, gas, nuclear, wind, solar, geo, hydro, they're all in the same market. They're all bidding against each other. So coal and gas, they can respond. They can provide the power. Wind, solar, whatever, it depends. It depends. Better price, cleaner for our environment, but not making the investors happy if they can't provide. So we need to change that policy, that they're not competing in the same market. If we really want to focus on environment and protecting our environment, then don't have those compete against, it's not apples to apples, it's apples and oranges. So we kind of talked about the interconnection regions already. There's 3 major regions, so I won't get into that. What is important to know is there's a great deal of clean energy projects that are in the interconnection queue, is what it's called. The queue takes years to get approval. So most investors don't want to hold on to that investment for that long without a return on their investment. So you can see here, 73% of them are proposed to be online by 2024, and only 13% have agreements. Those investors are dropping out. And when the investors drop out, that project has to go back into the queue again and start all over. And these numbers are a little outdated. It's this was by Berkeley Lab, which is probably one of the better reports I've read. So I haven't found another report that really gives me great numbers. But basically, if we're looking at implementation, it's 3 to 4, some areas 5 years for approval to get anything over 500 kilowatts approved on the grid, if you're going to connect to the grid. So, like I said, the typical duration, 3 years. It's gone up to about 4 years in some areas, 5 years in other areas. So it's a process. So what are your options? I say let's do things that can, number one, minimize your demand, like we've been talking about here with different green infrastructure that can maximize your, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Anybody want to help me there? Basically, reduce your energy demand. Conservation, your efficiency, those, thank you, appreciate that. So how can you minimize your footprint? How can you utilize what you can create yourself? You know, all of us in this room, we're exchanging energy. It's just an exchange. It's an exchange. You can exchange it with your building materials. You can exchange it with your landscaping. You can exchange it by even where you position yourself for your building. You can exchange it. There's technologies that we're doing right now with going to try to put this appropriately, cow manure. Cow manure to fuel hydrogen fuel cells that are quiet, zero carbon emissions, and can fuel entire buildings. You can do that with your wastewater in a city. You can do that with your human waste. You can do that with your trash. There are so many different things that you can repurpose to exchange energy for. And do that in a way that you don't have to get through this interconnection process approval. So looking at all these different options, working together as a tribe, understanding that it's a collective effort between all of the communication between one another, it's vital. And it's not just environmental, it's economic. It's an economic importance. The buy-in of, you know, when we look at even transportation, the companies that are buying into the EV vehicles, if they don't get a solid infrastructure to put these vehicles in, they're going to go upside down. They're not going to invest in it. It's larger than pharmaceutical impact, what we're doing with energy and what we're doing with green initiatives. So I think it's important. I work with Select Power Systems currently, and we help you select where to put your power, what kind of power you need. But I think it's important for all of us to realize, and it's my passion, when we look at the revolutions that we've had as a society in this nation, we were talking, I think, yesterday with some of the other countries and the history that they have. The revolutions that we've gone through, we, right now, everybody in this room, we have the great honor to be a part of multiple revolutions coming together all at once. We have technology, we have transportation, we have energy, we have society. All of it is converging, and we get to be a part of that change. So be the power to make a difference. Speak up and do something. And I appreciate your time. Oh, did we have any questions? No? Okay. Did I stay with him? Thank you.
Okay, so next we are going to have a very interesting talk, presentation, when we talk about kids and influencing the infrastructure, better street for kids. And we have the honor to invite Kurt Kamener and Hank Resnick.
Do we have microphones? Want me to start?
Sure.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. I'm Hank Sanchez-Resnick. I have a hyphenated last name. The title of this session is Influencing the Infrastructure, Better Streets for Kids. Kurt Kaminer, on my left, is an expert at that. And I'm really very proud to introduce him. We've been working together for several years. I live right near an elementary school in Coconut Grove here in Miami that is doing wonderful things to try to get more kids to bike and walk to school and reduce the automobile traffic in and around the school. And Kurt has been very instrumental in that. So Kurt is part of the Kids Neuroscience Center at the University of Miami Medical School. Their mission is to study and focus on kids' mental and brain development, but safety in the world around them is a really important part of that. And transportation safety is very critical for young people, especially going to and from school. So the Kids Neuroscience Center has developed two programs called Bike Safe and Walk Safe, and they have curricula, they have materials, they have information, they have research, and they have an action component where they're working with schools all over Miami-Dade County and doing really wonderful things. So why don't we start with that? Tell us about that.
Thank you very much, Hank. And also, I should point out, Hank is not only the founder of Bike Coconut Grove, but also a co-founder of the Friends of the Commodore Trail, basically a parallel to the Underline, really, in Coconut Grove that's in the works, and really, really fantastic work that Hank has done in the community. That said, the Kids Neuroscience Center's Bike Safe and Walk Safe programs, as Hank mentioned, they were started with the intention of decreasing pediatric spinal cord and neurotrauma incidents. We saw a very high number of kids being hit by cars that were coming in for Jackson Trauma Center. And so that was back in 2001 that Walk Safe was founded. Bike Safe came along in 2013. But the other thing that we really found, you can have your curriculum, have it in schools, but the thing with education is that you can't educate yourself out of a bad infrastructure problem. And one of the things that has become really, really clear now over the last 10 years or so is that we need safe infrastructure. We need protected bike lanes in our cities, not just for kids, but for riders of all ages and abilities. And so I'm the communications manager for the program. We actually are a public health program, so I have a wonderful team that works with me that has oodles and oodles of data, not just about the crashes and what we need to do. I'm basically the one who's bringing forth the message that, and bridging the gap between public health, engineers, and the general public to point out that we really do need this type of infrastructure in our cities. And I think that was really brought forth quite well by the study from the University of Colorado, Denver, and the University of New Mexico. I think this was in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or just as the pandemic was happening. It's a 13-year study that looked at 12 cities, or I might have that reversed. But what it ultimately found is that the introduction of protected bike lanes in a city would average out to probably about 50% fewer crashes involving bicycles and automobiles than if that city were not to build those protected bike lanes. And they actually found in the studies in the cities that they had looked at that at least I think 3 or 4 of them actually saw not only increased numbers of ridership, but they saw even greater numbers than that. That's just a projection. And indeed, we've been seeing in some of the studies, in some of the surveys that we've done, not studies, but surveys that we've done recently, parents want to see protected bike lanes. Parents want to see safe streets. They want to be able to cross the street with their children, or allow their children to ride to school. And it's become it's something that in a car-centric city like Miami, it can be a little bit difficult, at least from the public engagement side, even though we've got really good data from schools and parents. Sometimes you go into a public meeting and it can be a very different story, and I'm sure a lot of engineers and planners here know that all too well. So as I said before, I'm basically, as communications manager, coming forth with a concept, basically, ways to go and make protected bike lanes non-threatening, shall we say, to make it so if you're a member, if you go into a public meeting, you already know about protected bike lanes, the benefits that they have to your community, and you actually realize, hey, this is a wonderful thing. And also to help encourage public works to build more of them. As you saw, the downtown protected bike lane was there as well. And we've been able to do quite a bit in terms of influencing the messaging, especially with instead of, let's say, victim-blaming messages, which I know Andy Bonneau mentioned earlier, to actually do educational messaging that's very positive and talks about the benefits of protected bike lanes.
You sort of jumped right over a big piece of it, I think, because I thought you were going to talk about bike and walk to school day.
Oh, we're going there.
The infrastructure is extremely important. With a big problem, and we're addressing it here in Miami, is the lack of infrastructure to promote safe bicycling and walking. We have very high rates of pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities and injuries here in South Florida, among the highest in the country. And it's because of the infrastructure. The infrastructure was basically built for cars. So Kurt and I and many other people here in Miami are trying to shift that whole mindset so that there's more of an emphasis on infrastructure for biking and walking. One way to do that is to start to build a foundation for people to think differently about how to get around. So tell them about bike and walk to school day. That's been one of the greatest successes.
Absolutely.
We're building infrastructure, but we're not waiting for the infrastructure.
Yes, as Hank was mentioning, nationwide on a given day, usually set by the not the Ped Bike Resource Center, the PBIC in North Carolina, there is a walk to school day and a bike to school day. But we've been taking it a little bit further, shall we say, in that there's a number of schools in Coconut Grove, the community down in the south end of Miami, and the coastal community, really, village. And every year for Bike and Walk to School Day, they don't do just one school. Basically, Hank and his team work together to get almost every school in Coconut Grove to participate in Bike and Walk and Roll to School Day. And Roll to School Day, we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. And in doing so, we realized, okay, how do we continue this motion? How do we make it so it's not just a one-day thing, which all too often it is because of the lack of infrastructure. Now, Coconut Grove happens to be unique in that it has a lot of walkable, bikeable and walkable streets in theory, in that they're rather narrow in the neighborhoods and they're rather conducive to bike buses. And so that's the first thing that really caught our eye, because at one particular school, the PTSA at Coconut Grove Elementary School has, is a group of very like-minded parents who believe that it is wonderful to ride with your ride with your child to school in the morning, and it's good for them, it's good for their health, it's good for their well-being, and they have been doing some bike buses there off and on. And so we realized when we looked at the street that there was one problem, that although most of the neighborhood streets are safe, The school street itself was one way at the point where the neighborhood ended, and you had about 300 automobiles being driven by parents during drop off of their own children, going the other way, right against a bike bus, basically. And by bike bus, I mean something very similar to what Sam Balto does in Portland. In fact, there's one of the best-known bike buses in the country. Sam Balto, who is a PE teacher in Portland, got this started, and it's now probably the best-known bike bus in the U.S. right now. And so we have about, 80, 100 parents and kids at Coconut Grove Elementary who ride on in, and we realized, wait a second, there hasn't been that much luck in doing pop-up tactical urbanism in Miami-Dade County. I mean, it was attempted, or shall I say greater Miami-Dade, because this is happening in the city of Miami. There was a quick build program, a pilot for, how do you call it, permitting process that they attempted in 2019. Didn't work out as well as hoped. But we were able to work out something with the Miami Police Department where they were willing to do a partial street closure to allow us to build a pop-up protected bike lane for one day, for a couple of hours, to, give it a try. And so it was quite successful, shall we say. I mean, it's not on the slides just yet, and Hank, if there's anything you'd like to add to that, go right ahead.
Well, there are 11 public and private schools in Coconut Grove that I and Kurt's program have been working with, and we've seen great success. Just tremendous support for the programs from parents and teachers and principals. One thing I think that's very convincing to people is that we've done counts of cars coming to the school. Coconut Grove is actually a very congested community. There are a couple of major streets that go right through the heart of our village, which is it's like a separate part of Miami. Some of us wish it were, but it's a very autonomous neighborhood. But there's just tons of traffic coming north and south, going through Coconut Grove, not necessarily to Coconut Grove, and then another tons of traffic going to and from the schools. So one thing we've done is we've done traffic counts at a couple of the major schools, and we've seen reductions on the bike and walk to schools days that have been very successful. We've seen reductions in traffic in cars passing the school of 10 to 20%. So that's really significant, and I think that's helping to convince people that this is really worth doing. That there are a lot of people who will say things like, you will never get people out of their cars in Miami, and it's clear that that can happen. So the next step that we're working on is to build some infrastructure that will help to make it happen, and I think you can tell them about that.
Of course, and just to build upon that, I know that we've talked a lot about autonomous cars and EVs and such. The one thing that we can't emphasize enough is that if we replace all of our internal combustion vehicles right now with EVs, we still have traffic congestion, and we still have the deaths that come from dangerous driving. There's a phrase out there that goes, we don't need more driverless cars, we need more carless drivers. And indeed, we found that the protected bike lane pop-up that we did, those counts that you did, if I'm not mistaken, that was about a 30% reduction, 70 vehicles. Yes, there was roughly about 70 vehicles less during pickup. And I'm not sure if we did draw, it was just pickup.
That graphic right now shows you the protected bike lane on the school that's about a half a block from my house. It's a wonderful school, and that school has been extremely supportive of what Kurt is talking about. Go ahead.
I'll run. Again, the pop-up is meant basically to gauge public opinion and also to inspire. Obviously, again, we didn't want to create a pop-up bike lane and just say, okay, here's a pop-up bike lane, hope you like it. We wanted to make sure that the public was actually ready for it and that they were interested in it. Since there was a bike bus, let's see if these families were interested in a protected bike lane in front of the school. And so this was the very first test that was done, also because we only had so many cones available. I wanted to see if the traffic flow from the neighborhood would actually work if there was a dual lane protected cycle track, that is dual lane bike lane on one side of the road. So starting simple, tried it, everybody actually did file into it. And so the next year, and that's going to show up on the screen eventually, the next year we decided, okay, let's go all the way down the street, 630 feet worth. We're going to paint we're going to put some tempera paint on the street. That's literally finger paint that's been rolled onto the street for a couple of hours, put cones all the way down, and as you can see, there's the bike bus with all the kids and families arriving, and it was an absolute success. And that's actually the first one that we did, the first complete demo that we did in 2022, and I think in May 2023, that's also going to show up there. We had a wonderful thing happen where the PTSA and the kids came out to paint. Would you like to talk about that, Hank?
That was great. Well, a lot of this is because of Kurt and his colleagues and the energy that they bring into this, but it's also a coalition of parents, community advocates, people like me. I have grandchildren. I don't have any kids in these schools, but I'm really pushing for this kind of thing to happen. So we've all come together. Last May was maybe the best one because we had the painted bike lane, we had the cones, we had everybody very well organized. So, but unfortunately, we're talking about actually 2 days a year. We do one in the fall and one in the spring. We're going to be doing one in November again. But we started to realize that we needed to make it more permanent. It couldn't be a pop-up anything. It had to be a permanent something. So these things are hard, and they take a long time, and they require political will. Fortunately, we have political will in the community, and we got the city commission to endorse changing that street. We're not looking at it anymore. There it is. That's the street. That was a weird street because part of it was one way and part of it was two way, and it could be very confusing, chaotic at drop off and pickup time at the school. The school is right on the street. That we're looking at it again there. So the first thing we had to do was to change the whole street to one way. And we got the city commission to do that. And I was away for the summer. And when I came back, lo and behold, the street had been converted to all one way. And some of the worst problems with the street, very bad drainage, bad curbing, bad crosswalks. The whole street had been completely rebuilt. So that's a start. It's not permanent for the protected bike lane, but we're headed in that direction.
Indeed, and as a matter of fact, one of the reasons for choosing for the longest time, since protected bike lanes are a very important part of our about reducing the number of people driving. Obviously, not everyone. It's for those who want to, and there are a lot of people who do want to either bicycle commute or, for that matter, use a scooter or an electric bike. All micromobility can benefit from these lanes. This pilot served not only just for the school, but it served as an inspirational piece, basically an inspirational piece that advocates can do a pop-up bike lane in a city that's mostly car-centric, find a way to do it, and inspire change. And indeed, at least for this year, it's looking like we're going to do one more pop-up before there's whether it's going to become a permanent protected bike lane remains to be seen. Obviously, even though the pop-up was designed to be follow more or less MUTCD guidelines. We wanted to, it's still something of a little bit of contention with Public Works in terms of the design, but at the same time, it's something that the Business Improvement District now likes it so much that that street so happens to be bordered only by a since pedestrianized street.
Excuse me, I just want to say that woman in the sort of reddish, pinkish dress is the county commissioner for our district in the county. She has been very supportive of this, and so has the city commissioner. And it's just so important to get the political leaders behind you. It's the engineers, guess what? The engineers never like this kind of stuff. They have not been educated to do this sort of things. That's going to take generations. So, but the political leaders will push them, and then the community people and the parents will push them.
Actually, to build on that, though, I should point out that the head of Visions, Miami-Dade Vision Zero, Lisa Colmenares, recently sent me and Matthew Goltanoff from Bike Walk Miami Beach a prospective redesign of an intersection in Miami Beach at Dade and Purdy Boulevard, which was rather contentious a couple of years ago when a rider was killed in that location. And we had, Matthew and I had brought forth a couple of concepts that could be put forth, which we had heard the usual no's from the engineers. But the Vision Zero team persevered, and they had they got a subcontracted engineering firm to do a conceptual plan. And not only did they do everything that we had in the last proposal, they exceeded it. And they brought it forth to the City Commission in Miami Beach just a couple of days ago. And who knows, it might actually happen, and they may actually fast track it. So we're starting to see some very positive change. And, it takes a village, and it takes a lot of advocacy. And pop-ups like this with a lot of positivity behind bicycles, rather than the usual thing that we hear about safety as a negative point. By turning that on its head and talking about how we can make cycling better, more positive and such, that's definitely a part of getting buy-in and political buy-in as well. Of course, we started in Coconut Grove there because that's where we already had a group of people who were very like-minded in that respect. But to get more bike infrastructure underground, which is arguably the cheapest thing that you can do to get less people driving and improve the resilience of your city in terms of transportation. The cheapest thing you can do, mind you, public transportation, rail, buses, everything with that, extremely important. Bicycles are not the end-all, be-all, as much as Hank and I might want it to be at times. But nevertheless, it is a very simple thing to do in comparison to big infrastructure projects, really, not expensive at all. As a matter of fact, this 3D rendering here with Ziegler's zippers, I priced that out, and I think it's about $35,000 to basically do the whole street, not with the current standard green paint, which is a lot more expensive, but for the bare materials and just to stripe it down with some semi-permanent paint, yes. And so, $35,000 to do a street, not bad considering that it creates a link to the Commodore Trail, because as I was mentioning earlier, there is one street in between Matilda Street, the street that you just saw, which has been pedestrianized over the pandemic, and it's going to stay that way. But the Business Improvement District is actually in favor of continuing the bike lane through it. So that way we can create a direct link between the very pedestrian-friendly neighborhood of the North Grove, across Matilda Street, across Fuller Street, and right down to the Commodore Trail, which basically will link you to the south to Coral Gables, and further up north and link to downtown Miami and the Underline. Basically creating, with two streets with a simple protected bike lane, creating an unbelievable network with the finished Commodore Trail. Mm-hmm. Anything else that you want to add?
Do we have a time limit?
I believe that we can actually do a Q&A. I mean, that's going to loop. I set that presentation to loop. And by the way, this was created very early on, so I don't have Hank's information there. If you go and Google Bike Coconut Grove or Bike Grove, you're going to find him. And I highly suggest that you look Hank up because he's done an amazing job in Coconut Grove and throughout Greater Miami-Dade to bring safe cycling forward for Miami.
I really appreciate that, but if you're going to go to a website, go to their website.
Better yet, you could go to BikeSafe's Twitter feed where, I'm not an engineer, I just play one there, So, we're always talking about better advocacy and such. As a matter of fact, just like Andy Bonneau, who, to plug him, he has an unbelievable Twitter feed as well, and we're often retweeting each other's content. Okay, sounds good. And so that's it from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You are very kind. Thank you very much. Now we invite David Graham. He's CIO of the city of Carlsbad, California. And he's going to talk about the alchemy of a tradition and innovation, creating people-centric connected communities. Welcome.
All right. See if this is working. One of them should. Not that one. This one. That one's working. All right. Well, it is really a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I'm excited to get to share a little bit about what we're doing. But I think we've heard a lot of things about sustainability, about technology. Pretty certain this is the first time anybody's mentioned alchemy. And so I think that when I'm kind of sharing here related to this particular work in the city of Carlsbad, but also as the co-chair of civic innovation at the Harvard Technology and Entrepreneurship Center, I like to think about this in really terms of transformation and what can be transformational. And what we see here is transformational. Alchemy, as you all know, is the science, the fake science, of being able to turn base metals into gold, right? This was something that for many, many, many years was something people thought that they could do and would try to do and would sell us that they could do, sometimes like some of the promises of technology that kind of fall flat on their face. Nobody's been able to pull that off so far. And yet, we think about some of the amazing things you can turn just a couple of words into a photorealistic picture of a child using Midjourney in about 180 seconds. So there is some amazing transformational things, but when I think about the future, I always go back to the past. And when I was a child, I loved to read. I was a total nerd, but I was also really excited and interested in the future. It was something that I was always kind of, what's the next thing? And there was one particular comic that I liked called Closer Than You Think. And this was supposed to be in like Popular Science magazine or Popular Mechanics. This is what the future was going to look like. And so the future was going to look like fat plants and meat beets. So using and growing the proteins that you could get from a cow or for a pig, we could do that. That was going to be somewhere in the future. Now, I've not seen any sort of radishes with T-bones on them like you see here, but we all know that this has been achieved, right? The growing market in plant-based meats is incredible. And it is amazing technology that's occurred, revolutionary. It still will not get me to eat a Whopper. I'm sorry, no thank you. We look at other technology, like for example, this one. Closer Than We Think, the Sunray sedan was on its way, zipping around with just the power of the sun, looking cool, looking interesting. Now we have a lot of interesting vehicles on the road, but I've not seen any of these anywhere yet, right? And there are some engineering difficulties when you consider trying to harness the power of the sun and put it into your tank. However, we've seen a growth in what? In charging EVs using solar. So solar charging EVs effectively doing the exact same thing, harnessing the power of the sun to be able to move around. And in Carlsbad, Aptera Motors has 40,000 orders for their actual Sunray sedan that is going in production right now. Harnessing the power of the sun to be able to get around. What was the future is here. It is not science fiction, it is science fact, and we're experiencing it. And it's incredible to be a part of this sort of revolution, that it seems like technology can do almost anything we dream up. But when I think about my past and what I was seeing as the future, I also think about the community that I work in, the place that I love, which is the city of Carlsbad. So Carlsbad was founded many years ago, and it was innovative kind of from the very start. In fact, they found alkaline water that made Carlsbad quite famous, but who knew what a Carlsbad was? They figured, how can we market this very unique pH-balanced water? And so, of course, they borrowed from Europe, because Europe always has the cool stuff. Europe has the history. And so they borrowed the town's name from Karlovy Vary, which at the time would have been Czechoslovakia, and that's where the city of Carlsbad was created, around how to brand this sort of healthy European spa sort of city in Southern California. Now, what it was also known for was only about 5,000 residents and vast land that was dedicated to agriculture. It was a healthy place. It was a clean place. It was a place where people were connected to nature. And of course, in places like that is exactly where you want to locate a power plant. Well, this was now about 70 years ago. You heard a little bit about power plants a little while ago. The Encina Power Station was plunked right down on our beautiful shores of Carlsbad 70 years ago because there was water there. And what do you need to do with a power plant? Well, you need to be able to cool it. A cheap and easy way to be able to cool the power process. That does not seem particularly compatible with the flower fields just around the corner. At the same time, the city of Oceanside, because this was unincorporated, just a bunch of farmers, decided they wanted the taxes from the power plant, so they tried to annex all the way down the coast. And those farmers got together, and 5,000 of them rose up and said, no, we're going to be our own city. Their own city with self-determination, with plenty of land that moved into a master plan community. And when I go back and look at this from the 1950s, the funny thing about it is somehow, even though things change, they stay the same. Because the two big reasons for incorporation were water and taxes. And in California, what do we fight about? Water and taxes. So this was the city that was kind of brand new, fresh, with the ability to master plan what it was going to do and going to be, but with a power plant plunked down right in the middle of it. And once again, Carlsbad ingenuity found ways over the years to take what was an eyesore and turn it into an asset. So not only was back in the 50s, $66 million, which was a lot of money at the time in investment, plant, the tax basis for this brand new city, but it also, over the years, because of the water intake and the approvals that had occurred by the Coastal Commission, allowed for the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere to be created. Right there, once again, taking something that's eyesore, turning it into an asset so that the exact same feed that had been going into the power plant could go into creating the desalination plant. And in those waters that were nearby, in that lagoon that you just saw, it was quite warm. And that warmth of the water allowed for an interesting feature of nature. In fact, that lagoon is a perfect place for growing mussels and oysters. And through some fascinating science and engineering, a vertical oyster and mussel farm has been created. So if you come to Carlsbad, in the shadow of that power plant, you can both drink desalinated water and also eat oysters that have been grown right there and farmed in a sustainable manner. Those are the hearts of innovation that we believe that the ingenuity of people and a people-centric approach to community can take these things that really could appear to be harmful and turn them into a vibrant ecosystem, transforming technology that could be damaging, such as a power plant like that, into something that can be great, and using the powers of science and technology to create desalinated water to be able to create an oyster farm that's sustainable there. And that is what really leveraging people and the power that we have of innovation and ingenuity is so important as I think about what the Carlsbad story is and how you create people-centric communities. Our region, in the San Diego region, is well known for a lot of smart city firsts. The first all-electric car share fleet in North America, one of the largest deployments of streetlights, some of the first sustainable climate action plans in the entire country. It is a place that has really bred this unification of technology, science, with an eye towards the future. At the same time, we have the same problems every resident does and wants. People want what they want, and they want it now. And it seems like it's almost impossible to serve all of the needs. And when I think about the needs that people have today and the disruption of technology, I think about my friend who created the millennial nativity scene. Because I think here, even though it's already getting a little outdated, you can see how connected everything is. You have your hipsters on their Segways with Amazon boxes, so logistics. You have Mary and Joseph posing for a selfie that will go on Twitter or X or something like that in a connected solar house. You have the dude that's probably streaming Netflix, and you have the sustainable food supply that is all occurring here. The interconnectivity that we exist and have today is absolutely tremendous, and it also has a direct impact on who and what we are as a community, because just think of it. 10 years ago, how many devices did you have? How many do you have today? And that connectivity that can be so great can also be so damaging. We think about the rise of mental health in young people associated with their image because of their connections via social media and other things. We think about the ability and inability to really connect with people in person and one-on-one. And so when we think about a people-centric community, leveraging what is best of technology while also trying to maintain that human connection is absolutely crucial. Which is why when we launched off on our smart cities, or what we call connected communities journey, we focused around, first, going out to the residents. What did they care about? All of our main principles in Connected Carlsbad, which is a civic innovation roadmap, inclusive civic innovation roadmap, came directly from the people. And what we heard from them and the changes that they wanted and the future they wanted to have was to pursue community-wide digital transformation. Why? To be able to be more connected and to do the things more conveniently and easily. To build capacity for data-driven decision-making, because then they could understand government was making decisions that were evidence-based. Fostering a vibrant civic engagement culture where people feel valued. Enhancing accessibility and transparency, because that builds trust between people and the government. And promoting safety and sustainability through connectivity, because through these ways, not only can we be safe today, but looking towards the future and the disruption and disasters, as we heard about before, through a more sustainable approach to safety, through connectivity, we can address those things. And so these 5 elements really created the basis for our people-centric community. Well, then, of course, as soon as that came out, we had a little bit of a pandemic. And instead of putting everything on hold, it actually accelerated things for us. And I love this. Digital transformation is years away. I don't see our city having to change anytime soon. We all had to, and we all had to very quickly. And so we had built a bit of a foundation around connectivity and data. So one of the first things we did when we saw the rise in cases that were occurring, or actually the fact more people were getting sick and hospitalized because there wasn't much data on cases, is we leveraged our computer-aided dispatch system to begin looking at all the calls that included flu-like symptoms, because at the time, COVID had very similar symptoms to the flu, and although you couldn't test for it as much in the very beginning, if people were able to determine, the EMTs, that someone had flu-like symptoms, there was a possibility that that could be a cluster for COVID. And you can see the heat mapping that we use to provide situational awareness to both our emergency operations team, using the ingenuity to say, how can we find and create insights around this, even in the lack of actual data at the time about testing and testing rates. We then turn that into information for the public, because as much data as we can use, being able to empower people and help explain and understand is a part of that people-centric community. And so we took and convinced the county to begin providing case rates based upon city, and took for cities of 50,000 or more in our region, not just how Carlsbad did, which you can see we maintain basically the lowest case rates of any city in the entire region, but the interventions and things that people were being asked to do and how that affected the case rates. So when there had to be lockdowns, or when masking orders occurred, or when various different things were requested by the government, we were demonstrating to the public that their actions mattered and they were a part of this connected community. And through daily updates and regular communication and two-way engagement, we turned the data and insights into a tool where people could take responsibility to take safe precautions and behaviors to help keep their community safe. And that is a tradition of Carlsbad, that reliance and care about the community and keeping the community safe that goes all the way back to its original founding, that we found and were able to really excite and inspire during the time that we were experiencing COVID. And we found gaps, places where technology had fallen down. For example, right now, if you want to find a place to go eat, what do? Yelp, Google, take your pick, right? You may or may not remember, there was about a 3-month period, at least in some of the states that were shut down, where nobody knew what was open for delivery or what was closed. In that particular case, we actually went out and polled all of our restaurant businesses and created a map so that people could see and understand this information, because the big companies weren't doing that work at the time. And it ended up that every single business that got on this map, once again, just taking data, exposing it to the public, every business reported an uptick in sales, an uptick in patronship, and an uptick in their business, likely saving many of those businesses because of creating those connections. And you heard about advanced versions of this, but the other insight that we had was, why does a human need to be on a site to do inspections when, in fact, the construction folks or whomever's on site has one of the most powerful tools in just having a smartphone that could show us around with streaming video? That's a disruption during COVID that we carry on to this day, an amazing efficiency. And so the lesson I think from this is whispered insights can really amplify innovation. If you're willing to look beyond the noise, beyond the issues or people who are saying, this is the big problem, but find those whispered insights, the things at the bottom of it, behind the noise, you can truly find ways to amplify community innovation. Now, this does also require investment, but not necessarily investment in technology, although that's important, but for us in culture. Because you can have all the bells and whistles and baubles and systems, but if people aren't using it, it's absolutely worthless. So our model really is this idea of engaging with our employees and with the community, then empowering them to be able to use and feel like they have the agency to conduct innovation, to move change, and then embedding those learnings in policy and process so that it gets reaffirmed, but then never stopping. Always looking back to reimagine what you've learned so that you have this continuous improvement approach. And so in our Innovation and Economic Development Department, which I run, we have a whole series of services that are really focused around, yes, teaching and training in and around innovation, but also having fun. Getting people to enjoy and look at their work and reframe it in a new way can bring some incredibly impactful ways of doing things, and empowering them with their own data. So in Carlsbad, anyone who wants to use our standard data analytics platform can. Anyone who wants to be trained on it can. And they're being trained on their own data with a recent graduate from a local university. So you're not just learning how to use a system, but you're actually applying it directly to your work, which is discovering amazing insights no matter what your position is in the city of Carlsbad. And we help to explain and train no matter who you are. I mean, here is a lifeguard explaining to the What Works Cities people how the collection of data and analytics power data-driven decision-making at the beach. I will guarantee you, he did not go to school for data analytics, right? And yet we translate it into a way that is useful for them with systems that are usable, that end up making them a part of this culture of data and innovation without big scary words like, are you a data scientist? Taking that information, being able to go to the source like our EI2 program, our Economic Insights program, but not just taking the data and pushing it out through reports, but translating it into visual, engageable, usable information like our Doing Business in Carlsbad story map, where no matter who you are, you see a connection to it that are inspiring businesses to stay in Carlsbad, to grow in Carlsbad, to attract in Carlsbad, I think is one of the big parts of how you become more people-centric, because we don't think about just having the data or reporting on it, we think about the end user. Who is going to best benefit from this, and how do we put it in a way, a format, a method that will be useful for them? So here I think that curating curiosity amongst your employees, amongst your community, amongst those who are interested in this space, curating curiosity realizes that core connection. It is the thing that takes, oh, well, maybe I should learn that, to, oh, I'm constantly interested and curious, and so I buy into this idea of data-driven decisions, innovation, and how it has an impact on the community. So this is my fire chief. Now, he also is not a data scientist, did not go to school for anything along those lines. He's a psychologist, though, which I found odd and interesting. When I first came to the city, he came to me and he said, David, let's go to a conference. And I always hate it when I hear a department say, let's go to a conference, because inevitably, they're going to come up with some crazy new idea that we're going to have to figure out. He went to this conference and saw a product of visualization of data insights using fire department data. Well, it turned out that it was a really nice presentation, but it didn't exactly exist. So he said, I want that. And that's usually about as much instruction as I get from my client departments. We built the fire operation intelligence system off of this using Esri and GIS data, but really visualizing it and getting down to, through a partnership with our computer-aided dispatch agency that does it for 18 agencies, a data sharing agreement that got all of that data moved into our systems real time, that has been able to allow us to do things like turnout times, granular information on response times, by the unit, by the location. Also, since we also support cities outside of us and they support us, how many calls are we doing outside the city? What types of calls? This level of deep insight and data was not available to the fire department ever before. One of the insights we got was, why do we have so higher response times by the beaches? Well, it turned out it wasn't the beach's fault. It's that there's a coastal rail line that runs directly through basically where the beach side of the city is and the rest of the city. And guess where all of our fire stations are located? Where the rest of the city is, right? So those insights that we got from being able to have visualized data at a granular level, but in a way that was translatable to the departments, because the fire department actually built this system with us, led to the creation of fire station number 7, a temporary fire station, shockingly located on the same site of the power plant that it was there as well. When part of it got torn down and as it was redone, we now have that temporary fire station. They're reusing that exact same space from the very beginning, based upon the insights that the department were able to work with us on to end up leading to big conclusions that are literally reducing response times, which means saving people from life and injury. So taking something that firefighters wanted, arming them and working with them together to be able to have the information and data, and taking an innovation approach to it, as opposed to the usual IT approach, which is, give me your requirements, we'll go find a product that meets it as best as possible, and then we'll come back to you with that, and then you're going to have to adapt to that product. We now have an assistant fire chief who is more well-versed in GIS than probably any other in the entire country, specifically because he helped us to co-create this system. And that data is in every single fire station. Information that they can use on a daily basis regarding calls. So whether you're an engineer, an EMT, or a battalion chief, you're armed with the same information that's giving situational awareness to improve our operations. And so here, the big lesson was, we did ideate, but we did it with the department to co-create the solutions that actually allowed us to elevate not just where the city systems were at, but also the people that were involved in it. We made them co-creators with us in the development of a system that now they fully and deeply understand, can continue to iterate and improve on, and can look for other applications with that cultivating curiosity that perhaps we could find other uses as well. That, I think, is a people-centric approach as it relates to not just the community, which is where we talk a lot about, but to your own organization and the people that are in it. Because that is really where the power can come from to do amazing change. And when I talk about connection, sometimes it's difficult to see the connections between systems, people, things, values, etc. So here's a pop quiz. What do an MRI machine, baby formula, the dustbuster, a wireless mouse, a memory foam, wireless headphones, and the selfie stick, actually the optics in your camera, what do all these things have to do with each other? They seem pretty dissimilar. They're not all the same, not even in the same family. So how could there be any connection between these? Well, it turns out all of them owe their origin story to NASA. In the great moonshot, in the space race, in the drive for humankind to achieve something that had never been achieved before, all of these smaller innovations, all of this intellectual property, all of these other things grew out of that. And so when you are taking that moonshot, doing that big, hairy, audacious goal, going after the big challenge, don't forget all of the little ripples and insights and innovations and products that can come when trying to achieve the big goal. And I think there is where we oftentimes kind of miss the mark, because we see departments just want to achieve their goal, a community just wants this one thing, but true innovation in a people-centric community has the ripple effect to drive innovation across multiple different levels in ways that you would never even have seen connections. So our goal is really connecting the unconnected, the people and things that just are not connected, the disconnected, those that at some point have separated themselves off, and the disaffected, those who have some animus and trying to find ways to do all of that so we have an inclusive community for all is the drive that we have in Carlsbad. And how do we do that? Well, we use insights, resident sentiment insights. We talk to people, but we want to hear it in their own words. And we also find ways to do this at a neighborhood-based level. So one neighborhood is not the same as another neighborhood. You may live in Carlsbad, but you're very different. And so we want a deep understanding of people in order to create the sense of community and drive the opportunities for advancement and progress that the community really deserves. Ultimately, though, at the same time, it comes down to the individual citizen, resident, human being. And that's why that in-person human touch, like our Citizens Academy, like our volunteer opportunities, are the color upon which a lot of this can really matter. So as great as we get data and information from systems, people ultimately are what matter in what we're doing. So I like looking at how to help understand how we can take such complex issues and topics and subjects and really break them down. And one of my favorite things is the Rosetta Stone. And this is about all I know about it. Is it was a cool thing at one point that helped us understand a bunch of other stuff. So I had to ask my friend if it could explain to me what the Rosetta Stone was. So my friend is going to help explain what the Rosetta Stone was. As I sort of understand it and why it matters so much is it turns out in the history of humanity, we are kind of forgetful. We had forgotten about hieroglyphics, a particular ancient Egyptian language. Oh, and I guess ChatGPT is just going to explain the rest of it for us. So it turns out that the Rosetta Stone is important because we knew ancient Greek, but we didn't know the other two languages. And this is the insight for a people-centric community. You take what you know and what you have, and use that to translate into what you don't know and what you don't have. And in this particular case, they were able to take ancient Greek and look at the Demotic language and then the hieroglyphic language, and based upon what we knew, derive insights into something that had been completely lost. The same is going to go for many of these technologies that we see right now, like generative AI. You don't have to be an expert in the depth of it. The question is, what do you know and what do you need? And how potentially could this support you in what you are doing? And play with it, experiment with it. That's what we're doing in our city, and that's what we're doing with other people. But driving all of this comes back to the three parts of translation for me, which is we do all of this with empathy. We try to create shared understanding with our community and inside of our organization. And ultimately, we're looking for insight connected to value. Because if we can't find insights that are connected to value for us, our community, for people, then it's not something worth spending our time on. That's not where we go. And in those stories, we take a technology, for example, like automated water meter reading. So connected water meters, a big thing, lots of good things about them. I could go through all the statistics as to why it helps with more sustainable communities because of more efficient water usage and more connected and you have more data, blah, 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 blah. But when I think about a people-centric approach, I think about Carol. And I also think part of this story is that with automatic meter reading, Carol doesn't have to worry about Brutus anymore, right? These are the parts of stories that sometimes get so lost and yet are so rich and valuable when trying to drive change, when trying to drive addressing challenges in communities and things that we should make sure not to forget or miss. So why does this matter, and how do I do this work in my community or teach other cities to do this? Well, you have to find what matters, and it could be council goals. In our case, it's our strategic plan, which is really the entirety of what we're supposed to do in Carlsbad. But ultimately, it goes back to tradition, because these same 5 things that are our big goals for Carlsbad are the same 5 things that got those 5,200 people in Carlsbad to join together and create a new city. And so tying back to tradition, but then being able to take all the information, objectives, and push it back to the community by using a strategic plan dashboard that is very understandable, easy to read, deeper insights if you click on one of those cards, or other information and data, once again makes the community feel valuable and a part of the process in ultimately achieving the goals that they set in the very first place. And that is how we've been able to generate almost $30 million in support for a 5-year strategic digital transformation investment plan. If I just said, hey, let's do digital transformation, I will not have gotten $30 million from the City Council. But you can see each of these things directly tied to something that matters to people. And in that vast ocean of data, you have to be creating the policies and processes in order to take just amazing amounts of information and turning it into a delicious dish that anyone can enjoy. So the insight here for me is you really must invest in the unseen to see transformation, even though it's not easy. And that's where we focus a lot of time. And in doing so, when disaster strikes, for example, when a mother was struck riding her e-bike with her 16-month-old on the back, and she passed away, unfortunately, but the 16-month-old survived, we had built a foundation to actually immediately move and act, and City Council put $2 million towards traffic safety actions just a year ago on all modes of travel, education, engineering, and enforcement. And we had the information about people, what the crafted messages would be that could inspire people to move and to act. We had the ability to have information about the community to get them on board with the Safer Streets Challenge and the systems to connect with people. We were able to use data mapping to figure out where people were and identify the gaps where we could really generate support in the community. We also had the people and connections to do the trainings. Like, for example, we created an entire e-bike safety and biking safety program in our schools that in order to be able to park your bike on campus, you got your little e-bike training license. And we could see the impact on this with kids across the entire community so quickly. And it drove investments in things that you saw before, where we're able to look at injury collision heat maps and say, where do we need to be putting green paint? Where do we need to make improvements? Where do we need to be doing enforcement? Creating corridors and areas that had previously been incredibly unsafe, but using that data to say specifically, here's how we're going to target these investments, because this is where not just what people are saying they need, but we can actually look at the data to tell where and what needs to happen and when, and using innovative approaches to change the dynamics of the way people moved in all modes of transportation. And it wasn't just an enforcement, because enforcement is not sustainable. We actually gave out many times more warnings versus citations because we actually wanted people to go take the class. It ended up leading to, on all modes, a reduction of about 19%. We thought there was a trend of a 20% increase in collisions, injury collisions. We saw a 20% decrease because we had built those systems and that sense of community and tapped into that tradition that ended up creating value. And so Jason is a safer kid today because of what we had built in our people-centric community. And so the alchemy here that I look at and think about is not that it led to a What Works City certification for well-managed government our first time out. That is nice. And it's not because my city manager thinks I walk on water. That's nice too, for at least keeping my job. But it was the taking base, simple information, connecting it with people, and using that to not just transform our community, but be ready to respond in the case of any emergency and disaster. And so I think connected communities ultimately are about caring. And it's caring for the people, not just in the community, but in your own organization. And that is what creates an engaged culture that is able to drive so many amazing solutions. It is awesome and amazing that in just a couple of minutes with a couple of base pieces of information, I can create a gorgeous looking closing slide using Midjourney. That is very nice. And it is enjoyable to be able to play with things like that. And there is the power to transform simple things today into gold. But that doesn't happen if you can't put people first. And that is at the heart of our connected communities.
Thank you, David. Powerful presentation. I love it. Okay, so now we are going to have a presentation from Aron De Maio, a future vision of Miami committed to natural infrastructure. Aron is founder of Future Vision Studios.
Hi. Good evening. Is this the one? It's working. Hi everyone, my name is Aaron, and I'm a Miami native. I want to show you some of the work that we're doing in our studio and some of the projects that we are proposing for this future vision of Miami. So much of our infrastructure was built based on a desired level of service, which, as of recently, we haven't always seen it function to its full capacity, especially with different flood events, rain events, king tide events. And I've been watching these events for the better part of a decade and documenting and researching them. Can we open this to full screen? No, there's no video. It's all images. There we go. But so much of our infrastructure is not living up to those standards, and also even having additional consequences that were unintended. Is there a way that we can be looking at this infrastructure to actually create benefits to the community, benefits to the ecosystem, create healthier, more environmentally conscious neighborhoods? And we're using pumps to alleviate some of these issues, but even those solutions are having ramifications. This development that we're seeing without proper stormwater sedimentation controls is leading to outfalls that look like this, which is covering over the bay. So as we look at these large-scale infrastructure projects, we really need to account for more than the dollars and cents that it costs to build them, but also all of those characteristics, so that we don't keep having events like this, where we're having fish die-offs. For instance, here, last king tide in Little River, where these dead fish actually washed onto the shore over the seawall. And this starts from also how we're building our mobility systems that get us around, and how we're powering those mobility systems. We have to think about what choices we're going to make in order to move people throughout our neighborhoods. Because the people of Miami are definitely creative in their solutions, but it's going to take a large, comprehensive approach to executing on this. So I want to show you 4 different projects across different scales: the building, small park, a neighborhood, and the region. The first one at the building scale is actually about a component of the building, so green roofs. For instance, here in Design District, where we have lots of different green roofs, even green roofs growing food, which reduces the distance from farm to table. However, it's more than that as well. It also offers a nice aesthetic, and one of the main interests that I see is also for stormwater capture. We can capture water during these extreme rain events, hold it for a period of time, and that can reduce the amount of flooding that's happening on our streets. So we looked at the zoning code, which is what determines the amount of building that you can have, how tall it is, what kind of use it is, even how much you can build on a roof, for instance. And we made a proposal to allow for additional area to be built on that roof in exchange for creating green roofs at a 1-to-1 ratio. That was unanimously passed at the Climate Resilience Committee from the City of Miami, and then also passed at its commission, which is now being worked through at the staff level and hopefully codified later this year. When we look at a park scale, there's all different scales of these across the city, but we're looking at one in particular that was kind of an unplanned park. It was actually where a stormwater outfall was leading from a neighborhood here in Coconut Grove out to the water's edge, and it kind of served just a neighborhood function for the community. But it also is a very low-lying area, and it has tall walls on either side of this park, which facilitated storm surge entering into the neighborhood during Hurricane Irma a few years ago. So we looked at what we could do to actually take the risk from this park and create a benefit to the community. So here you see on the wall, we put tape to demonstrate to the community a storm surge berm that we wanted to build to help reduce the effects of when a storm surge came on ground from entering into that community. We built a 3D model and showed how during different levels of storm surge, it would actually stop the storm surge from entering. But ultimately, it's going to take a holistic approach from all of the neighbors in this community to come together and create a unified seawall height to work against a storm surge entering this community. And then we're actually going to jump past the neighborhood scale up to a regional level, because the regional level, I think, is key into getting the type of funding and adaptation we need at the neighborhood scale. We've heard a lot in the last couple of days about sea level rise, storm surge, and we have a lot of buildings at risk. On the beach, on the mainland, at 1 foot of sea level rise, here's 2 feet. At 3 feet, it continues to grow. And when you compound that storm surge risk over sea level rise into the future, you can see the seriousness of it. Here's with a Category 1, Category 3, and a Category 5. So when I see this, I think we need to have a comprehensive, large-scale adaptation approach to how we're going to handle this. When we look at the amount of vulnerable area here on this map of South Florida, in each of these squares, rectangles, which is magnified to a larger extent here, we have dozens of miles of seawalls, of coastlines, of shorelines that will either have to be adapted or be retreated from possibly at some point to be able to handle the sea level rise and storm surges that's incoming. So when you look at where the water is coming into those locations, there's these 5 main points: at the river, on either side of I-395, at the Holliver Causeway entrance, and up in Fort Lauderdale at the Stranahan River. And by focusing our efforts on these areas, we can greatly reduce the overall cost to that infrastructure. When we look at Brickell in downtown, right outside our door here, there's a natural funneling effect that can be seen being created from how the barrier islands were formed. And then how we also added additional islands like Brickell Key, which I think then funneled the water here during Hurricane Irma onto the land. We came up with this approach called Connect and Protect Miami. It uses a system of natural infrastructure. If you follow the orange line, it's a hybrid levee, which would be a berm that would connect from the high ground in South Brickell around downtown Miami, across to 395, and into the existing berms on South Point Park. And by doing so, we could reduce where the storm surge is entering into this vast area of low-lying land, up the river basin and throughout all of Biscayne Bay north of 395. This image shows downtown in an aerial perspective. and a possible scenario of how we could use green infrastructure in parkland by building out and up with a system of manufactured tidal locks that could close during these large-scale events and actually close off the mouth of the river from these storm surge events. By doing so, it allows the rest of the community the time to adequately prepare and adapt at a larger scale rather than smaller, kind of haphazard iterations at times. What this image also shows is the ability to reintroduce the natural infrastructure that was there at one point in time. The mangroves that lined our coastlines, which were removed for all the hardened seawalls. That could bring back all of the crabs, the fish, help restore the bay. So when we look at how we're going to introduce new infrastructure moving forward, it has to be more than just a level of service, but also all those co-benefits. Then we're going to go back the scale to the neighborhood. Once we introduce that regional scale and we can save the money on insurance, on damage risk after damage events, we can reintroduce that capital into adaptation across neighborhoods, which would then allow us to do the large-scale adaptation which is needed on higher ground. The example I want to show is here in northern downtown in Edgewater. We've analyzed this region of southeast Edgewater, which is very mixed use, high density, has a great park, proximity to transit, but it also has issues with traffic. It acts as a major north to south corridor along these two causeways, along these two streets, Biscayne Boulevard and 2nd Avenue. And it's very unsafe for being such a dense and urban environment. It also has issues with flooding, and part of that is because there's just massive amounts of paved area. You can see on a regular basis, even in small rainstorms, flooding throughout the entire neighborhood. So we looked at all of these different issues that are happening at this one point of Miami and how we could solve them cumulatively. We came up with this idea to reintroduce green infrastructure into this over-paved area, and that has to do with a lot of trees being added, bioswales on higher ground, redesigning the intersections to be safer for bikes and pedestrians so people can get out of their cars. We looked at each of the different intersections in the area and found gross inefficiency with the light timing because of where there was parking on either side of the stoplights, and that forced people to have to rush when they were crossing the street by foot. It was really dangerous and inefficient. So by using just the same amount of area, but changing how cars are moving across the intersection, we're going to be able to move more vehicles in a shorter period of time, which will then allow more of the light cycle to be allocated toward pedestrians crossing. It'll also allow lots more area for trees to reduce the heat island effect in this area. And we did this for each of the intersections throughout that entire area that I showed you. Introducing this tree-lined median along Biscayne Boulevard every other block. And then also for 2nd Avenue, which currently has no crosswalks, it doesn't have dedicated left turns, and lots of asphalt. It's very dangerous to walk along these streets. So by re-adding bike lanes, crosswalks, proper medians, we can reintroduce that human scale, allow for people to get out of their cars, stop using single occupancy vehicles, and make people want to travel by foot and by bike. But doing so is going to take a lot of effort. So the way to be able to activate these types of things is finding the higher ground, densifying through adaptation action areas, and looking at the big picture, kind of like what David said in the presentation before. Having that end goal, getting community feedback, and being rigid in what we want to see for the future, but open to how we get there and the details along the way. So by looking at each of these scales and remembering those different details along with the big picture of how we're going to get there will allow us to create that kind of natural infrastructure future that we all share within this one biosphere. Thank you.
Okay, so Now I invite Sarbas Paraharaj. He's assistant professor, University of Miami, and he's going to talk about promoting sustainability and resilience through transformative education. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernardo, for putting this together, and thank you for all your resilience to sit together for 2 days. So much information and knowledge. So I really appreciate you being here till the last moment. So I'm going to talk very briefly. This presentation is very short. Because I know that I'm gonna be standing here between you, your evening and this event. So I'll keep this very short. As already said, I'm an assistant professor with the Department of Geography and Sustainable Development, as well as the School of Architecture at the University of Miami here in Coral Gables. And I'm going to talk about how we are promoting sustainability and resilience through education. Throughout the couple of days, we heard the role of technology, we heard the role of design, science, and of course, community engagement, empathy. A lot of these factors come into play when you're talking about sustainability in communities. At the same time, education plays a critical role, right? If you look at the global urban landscape, we have currently over 60% of our people living in cities across the world, and that is only going to rise. In the United States. It's over 80% people live in cities. So we are talking about a community which is increasingly urban, and at the same time, those are the communities who are impacted most significantly by the changing nature of our climate. And that is the really nexus that we look at through education lens. And what is happening is that there are tremendous amount of innovation in technology these days. There are no dearth in dollars. If you look at the federal budget, the state budget, significant allocations are happening in this space of sustainability, of resilience, and in terms of investment in infrastructure. But who are going to make these changes, these policies, these technology advancements? And so what we see across the world, especially in developed world as well as developing countries, there are significant need for trained professionals who will go out and work in places like city of Coral Gables or Carlsbad in California that you saw, or in innovative organizations. These are the change makers. However, what happens is that we need more and more trained professionals who understands what resilience is, what sustainability is, because our education is often designed in a way where we look at problems from a very sectoral perspective. We have created these barriers of disciplines within our educational systems. So we look at architecture, we look at engineering, we look at health science, medical sciences, from a very segmented perspective. Whereas when you talk about sustainability or resilience, these are often interconnected challenges. And so we need to look at education from a very innovative and interdisciplinary perspective. When you talk about education, research is a critical component. And my work over the last 4 years, I have been recently joined University of Miami. Before that, I was in Arizona State University, where I have done tremendous research looking at heat resilience, particularly Phoenix in Arizona is one of the most hottest part of the country, and designing data and technologies and systems that can impact the community in adapting to the changing climates. And so you look at, these are the projects that I have delivered in partnership with the city of Phoenix, city of Tempe, in the state of Arizona, that looks from increasing tree canopy cover to looking at dealing with poverty and inequality in the society, because when you're talking about resilience and sustainability, the community who are at extreme risk are the ones who are poor. So how do we identify those neighborhoods and communities and really bring them into the discourse? And of course, looking at the temperature patterns and economic resilience, so a range of issues that we are trying to address from a multidisciplinary perspective. This doesn't get defined by a disciplinary boundary. As you can see, all these projects coming out intersects with different disciplines. So research is happening at a rapid pace on this space of sustainability and resilience. One of the major outcomes that I had was a recent publication through the US Census Bureau, a partnership that I have led over the couple of years that resulted in these community resilience estimates for heat. So this is now, we worked in Arizona, but this methodology is applied across the country now. So if you go to this website of the US Census Bureau, you can actually download loads of data where you can measure your community, how resilient your community is based on a number of indicators, so that your politicians and your council members can understand which community needs most investment and in which areas. So a lot of research and a lot of data is being available across the board. However, coming back, the challenge is we have this research, we have this technology. However, we are kind of in a very dark area when you talk about resilience for whom and by what means. So if you look at the climate adaptation and resilience, there has been tremendous research in innovation, technology. However, our educational curriculum and materials are not really preparing the next generation workforce in a way that we want, who could go out and solve these emerging complex challenges. And you would see that there has been research published recently which highlights there is not only there are lack of curriculum innovation in terms of bridging these research gaps and knowledge gaps, there are also systems theory that are complex, interlinked, interdisciplinary, which are increasingly essential to tackle this challenge. So what we are doing at the University of Miami is essentially shaping something called the Climate Resilience Academy. It's an interdisciplinary new academy built with millions of funding and with highest level of support from the university, which is a system that is built through number of departments, schools, and colleges. This belongs to the entire university. So I am a faculty in 2 different schools, part of this Climate Resilience Academy, and same time you have faculties from engineering, School of Business, School of Arts and Sciences, all participate in this academy to shape the curriculum. Now, what we have been doing through this academy is really reshaping the way we think about designing curriculum and courses. And this is the kind of flagship program that has been designed and being offered now called Masters of Professional Science in Urban Sustainability and Resilience. This is a kind of a flagship, new kinds of course across country. If you look at the courses that are offered traditionally in urban planning or in architecture, this kind of breaks down those different silos and disciplinary boundaries. And how? By looking at infrastructure and environment, which are generally, you look at environmental science or engineering domain knowledge and expertise. You're looking also at the social science perspectives from human and societal health. So the courses and the program is designed in a way to bring different perspectives and courses into the same umbrella. And of course, the economic and business development, as many speakers have said, all of these are critical components of resiliency and addressing sustainability challenges. So all together, bringing this 3-dimensional perspective, how they all interlinked with climate change stressors, and how do we design new policies and systems, and how can the students go out to the market knowing what resilience is, and how interdisciplinary and system-wide approaches they could learn and nurture and practice in the real world. So just for example, before I close, as I said, this is going to be a very short presentation. I want to show you just one course from this program. This is an entire master's degree, but this is just one course, 3-credit course. And you see, you will hardly see any course design anywhere in this country where in a single course, 13 of our premier faculties are teaching in just one course. And you'd see these are the different modules in one of that course. So if you look at the modules, if you read through them, you are looking at understanding what is climate change, right? The history. So a lot has been said regarding the change in temperature. Some of those presentations. You are talking about, GIS and how software and technologies could be used to address resiliency challenges. You are looking at extreme weather events, hurricane and flood surge protection policies and engineering approaches. You are looking at data literacy and approaches that you could use data engineering and data science approaches to solve resiliency challenges. And so climate-driven migration and disaster management. So as you can see, this is really breaking the disciplinary silos. This doesn't have any boundaries. And that's why you need these kind of interdisciplinary approaches. When you see those faculties who are teaching this single course, they're from marine sciences and engineering. They're from computer science. They're from School of Communication, from School of Architecture, Department of Geography. And think about the students in the classroom who used to have one course taught by one single professor who is trained in a particular discipline. And when we are trained in a particular way, we talk in a particular way and communicate, and the student will learn in that direction. And think about how much diverse experience and interdisciplinarity these 13 faculties bring into the classroom, and the enrichment the student gets from each of these courses. And that's the kind of new kind of curriculum design we are trying to bring to break down these silos and create the curriculum for the next generation. And the last slide is essentially, the course is designed in a three kind of interactive environment. First is essentially the student understand how do we curate and liberate data across these systems. So throughout the 2 days, you have heard about social systems, technologies, you need IoT systems, you need transportation, green infrastructure. How do we collect data from each of these systems? So students are learning in the classroom and also in partnership with the City of Coral Gables and other communities here. And of course, advancing cross-disciplinary thinking. As I said, this is at the heart of this course. So the students who are taking part in this course, they are also from different majors. So they are also engineering students, they are also art students, they are business students. And that creates a really vibrant environment. And that way, you are really advancing interdisciplinary thinking, not just through the faculties who are teaching the course, but the students who are participating, bringing really unique dimensions in solving these complex challenges. And of course, co-designing solutions. Much of the course, the last leg of this course is designed around application of the knowledge into the real community. So we are partnering with industry, with the city councils to really give students the projects, real world projects, where they could take this learning and apply in real world context and bring solutions to life in a really complex and changing world that we all live in. So that's the kind of knowledge I wanted to share with you, the way we are reshaping the curriculum through the Climate Resilience Academy. And feel free to look at the link I have given if you're interested, and that's the flagship program that we are really actively promoting these days. And that's the need of the hour, especially living in this city of Miami, which is at the forefront of climate change, and need for resilience is never was at this high that we are today. So that's my contact number, and thank you. And again, thank you for your resilience for sitting through the couple of days of this a lot of information and knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to invite Philip Wang. He's the Senior Global Advisor from Taipei Computer Association. It's a large association in Asia. And he's going to talk about what Taipei Computer Association is doing in terms of technology and also promote innovation. Welcome.
This is where I'm from. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, It's a great honor and pleasure being here with all of you. I believe the reason why we all gathered here or remotely watching this program is because we all share a common goal and common idea that we want and we will make our living environment better. And I'm especially thrilled being able to come back to Miami, the beautiful place I previously lived and worked for 7 years. And there have so many things happened since 1980s. A lot of major events I was here. And I recall in 1986 and 1987, I had the honor flying down from Atlanta, my first overseas assignment, to escort Taipei mayor, new Taipei city mayor, and Kaohsiung mayor visiting Metro Miami. And even once, Miami city government offered the helicopter, allow us to hover over the Miami to study the metro system. And because of that interaction and interchange, now Taipei City's mass rapid transit system, our metro system, is regarded as one of the best in the world. Every day, we averagely transport 2 million people in Metro Taipei. And the place I'm from is Taiwan. Let me briefly introduce the Taiwan's situation. I'm wondering how many of you has been in Taiwan before? Okay. Taiwan is an island, 14,000 square miles. In the southeast is in East Asia and southeast of the Chinese mainland and separated by Taiwan Strait. It's only 14,000 square miles. That is only quarter size of state of Florida, and with 23 million people. About 70-some years ago, when Taiwan was recovered from Japanese colonial government, the per capita income then was less than $100. And now it's one of the advanced region in the world. And and Taiwan is very mountainous and sparsely endowed with natural resources. I think the only resources we could develop is our human resources. And about 18 years ago, there is a cover story by Business Week, Why Taiwan Matters. The author, Mr. Bruce Einhorn, said, world economy couldn't function without it. How come? Sparsely endowed, endowed with natural resources could develop so rapidly. Of course, there are so many reasons. Rome was not built in a day. And all Taiwan people endeavor themselves in building ourselves up. And Taiwan people likes to save money. And for the past 30 years, Taiwan's foreign reserve holding always rank in the front among many nations. And the latest figure shows Taiwan foreign reserve holding has more than $560 billion, ranked fourth among many nations, and second only to Chinese mainland, Japan, and Switzerland. And for the past 30 years, that figure sometimes goes to the fourth or the sixth, but always we have a lot of foreign reserves, and I think we already paid the last foreign debt to the Saudi Arabia for helping us building the highway in Taiwan about 30-some years ago. And listen to those leaders in high tech, how they comment about Taiwan. The Qualcomm's senior vice president said Taiwan supply chain critical to artificial intelligence ecosystem. And Ms. Lisa Su, the president and CEO of AMD, she said AMD relies on its Taiwan supply chain. And Reuters reported foreign investors stream into Taiwan as AI stocks beacon. For the past 70 years, Taiwan started from a post-colonial economy, developed its agriculture, and then we developed, in order to save foreign reserve, we started to launch the program we called Import Good Substitute. By doing that, we try to produce what we can do, but not to import them from overseas. By that, we save the money. We save our foreign reserve. And then, back in 1960s, we started to launch, we call labor-intensive industries. We started to build up assembly lines for the electronic components for more advanced countries like United States, Holland, or Japan. However, because we keep saving money, and from 70s and 80s on, we gradually, combined with talents trained by our very good educational system, we started to become high-tech intensive and later also capital intensive industries. And that is why back in last century's 90s or the beginning of 20th centuries, Taiwan's computer manufacturing most of the time ranked #1 in the world. And during those capital intensive and technology intensive industry development, Taiwan started to build its industrial clusters. This is very, very unique situation. I haven't found many places in the world has this kind of unique situation. Look at Taiwan's map. Taiwan is very mountainous, and we are lacking of water. So people has the mixed feeling toward hurricane. In that part, we call typhoon. We don't like it because it brings disasters, but we need it because it brings waters to fill all our reservoir for next year's popular use of water and our irrigation. And the latest statistics shows Taiwan now, arable land which can produce agriculture, only occupied about 1.9% of our whole land. And with that kind of spatial condition, our people gathered together in different sections of Taiwan. And you can look at, there are tens of industrial clusters. Some of them concentrate on IC, some of them concentrate on clothes, some of them doing the precision machine. And when you go to Taiwan, you will see a major corporate are surrounded by several tens of satellite factories. They all concentrate on manufacturing something to form. They already formed a supply chain ecosystem to supply that major corporations' products. And Taiwan's IC industries developed that way. I remember back in 80s when I stationed in Atlanta, I went to Triangle area of North Carolina. My job was trying to meet with Taiwan's PhD students in high tech, EE, or chemical industries, or physics. And we try to attract Taiwan's PhD students studying United States Higher Institute to go back to build Taiwan's Hsinchu Science Park. And those efforts now proved very successful. In Hsinchu, we have IC-centered production class, industrial cluster. And now you will be surprised how much is the portion Taiwan's semiconductor contribute to the world. The statistic in the year 2022, Taiwan's total output from its wafer foundry occupied 64% of whole world's output. And her testing, assembly, and packaging in that part of semiconductor occupied 59% of the whole world's output. And when you look again at those IC chip under 7 nanometers, Taiwan's output occupied about 70% of whole world's. That is why Taiwan is so important. And because of this very well-integrated supply chain, Taipei Computer Association in 1974. It consists of 4,000 members. Most of them, if not in high-tech, must be high-tech peripheral industries. It has more than 4,000 industrial corporate members. And they urge the association to sponsor Smart City program. And the incumbent chairman, Mr. Paul Peng, he is very advanced in solution-oriented display industries. All kinds of solutions, be it iPad, computer monitors, or big screens, anything display-related. His company supplied the solution. And you are all invited to join us in Taipei for next year, which will be the 11th session of Taipei's Smart City Summit and Expo, and to be held between March 19th to March 22nd in Taipei, and March 21st to March 23rd in southern Taiwan city, Kaohsiung. And this year, we have about more than 550 companies participated. They displayed in 2,000 booths. And we have about 130,000 visitors came to this 2 exhibition, and we have more than 1,500 foreign dignitaries, VIPs, mayors visited Taiwan for that program, coming from 43 countries. And when we have that expo, we also have co-located exhibition, co-located expo. They are Smart Health Expo, Smart Building, Smart Education, Intelligent Transportation Control System, and net zero. For the past years, Taiwan's companies advanced from computer manufacturing into the industrial computer manufacturing. And gradually they combined those AI, deep learning, machine learning, and all other advanced algorithms and integrated with LiDAR, radar, camera sensors, advanced their computer production. And in the expo in Taiwan, you will be able to see all of their achievement. And if you go to participate in this program, we also have field trips and to let you visit the company. And if you have special requirement, you can ask the engineer, managing people, managing expert about the details of it. And we also have the City Leaders Summit. Last March, I had the honor to invite founder of this expo, Mr. Bernardo Scheinkman, and he met many mayors around the world. And they have very good cordial discussions about the development of smart city programs. And in that program, it is a very large G2G, B2G, or B2B network. And the importance of this is you go in there, you explore what you can get from meeting people, not only from Taiwan, but also from other countries. You will be able to meet same size of cities, mayors or their CIOs or CTOs, and you can exchange ideas about the common problems you encountered. And we had, last March, we had more than 550 sessions of matchmaking meeting made. And that brought a lot of cooperation following the matchmaking session. And during the expo, you will be able to see so many outstanding achievements by those industrial computer manufacturers, like embedded solution, like in the energy section, and we have iFactory. It's a from end-to-end solution of everything. And iHealthcare, I was also, when I was in one of the companies, I think Bernardo was there also, we saw how they integrated all things you can imagine in a hospital, inpatient, outpatients, emergency service, dispense of the medicine, and patient rooms checking, and all kinds of things you can imagine it will happen in hospital. It has integrated solution. Because this expo is a solution-oriented expo. We want the problem be solved. And if you have your respective situation, issue you want to be solved, you can immediately ask those exhibited companies, people, and they can provide you with the ideas. And I was also impressed by iLogistic industrial computers. Imagine you are a transportation company. You handle the air, sea, land transportation, where to track your goods, track your drivers, track anything you can imagine, or in an integrated system. And that makes things much, much easier. And I also see the advancement of robots developed. And one of the companies, their robot has been sold to several Japanese local government in providing directions to visitors to those local government. They also deploy them in library to help people visiting library to find the books they want and to guide them according to face recognition, posture recognition, and they can recognize immediately this is small children. They will just guide them to the children's book section. And also, it is deployed in a Japanese mall. And also in Taiwan, several hospitals utilize those robots to help their visiting patient to guide them into the related department. And as I mentioned, Taiwan is sparsely endowed with natural resources, and we need to conserve our water. So wastewater management and water conservation is very, very important for Taiwan. And we developed very good integrated system in water management. And energy-wise, we developed very good microgrid solution. And I read an article about Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, which is the largest IC chip manufacturing in Taiwan, in the world. And they have developed a chilled water energy saving system. Every year, they can save 30 gigawatt hours of their electricity. Okay, because following in the years to come, we will see the AI-enabled computers will develop very rapidly. And, you know, to have more rapid calculation for AI purpose, we will need to consume more energy. So we have to be very careful about how we meet the challenges to come. And also in transportation, we have electric vehicle powertrain solution and traffic control. Before Mr. Elon Musk is so famous, I don't know whether you know the first car he produced, Roadster, the engine, the motor is provided solely by a Taiwan's company, Fukuda. Okay. And in the medical and health section, as I mentioned, eye hospitals, and we have innovative solution for voice and speech disorder patient because they cannot pronounce properly and they cannot pronounce the words which can be fully understood by you. They do either implant or app to help them properly express themselves. And also, one of the companies, MyTech, and they cooperate with one Australian government in doing the mosquito management. We know mosquito can infect people with Zika, dengue, malaria, and if you go to the metro system in Miami now, they have drain and cover. There are a lot of warning signs trying to educate people and caution people to be aware of this situation. And also, many Southeast Asian countries install Taiwan-developed e-gate in their immigration services. And this is the figure for the last March visitors, exhibitions, and booths and forums we had. And we have signed many agreements between cities from Europe, from Latin American countries. And to go there is to explore, to network, and to promote. And we look forward to your registration and attendance at Taiwan's Smart City Summit and Expo in coming year. And if you have interest or if you have any question, please feel free to ask. And the application deadline for this coming next year, March Expo, will be January 26th. And thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much for everybody to participate in our event. Our event next year is going to be September 23, 25. We already have the date. We start the campaign tomorrow. And I'd like to see you all next year. Thank you. Bye.